Got your own fan club over there. I love it.
Oh my gosh, yeah. The best.
Plus moral support, plus athletic support, plus all the other things I'm sure that come along the way.
You know how it is running a business and getting on the road to do a podcast and running this gym, brother. I mean, there's this big team behind you with a message that goes beyond just fitness.
A lot of moving pieces.
And I love the support we have, including Mr. Eli Helfman.
Yeah, shout out to Eli from 8482 Media making it happen. This is going to be the second time he's helped make this happen.
Yep.
Sitting in the studio once again with John Norris, author, musician, outdoorsman, conservationist, TV show host. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Welcome back to the studio, my man.
Dude, it's so good to be here, Scott. Thanks for having me back.
I'm so anxious to catch up with you. I think if anybody listened to the last episode we did, which was probably 2 weeks to the day since we recorded last one, maybe 3 weeks to the day since we recorded the last one. Some of the feedback we got was overwhelming. Just me, I know I got a lot. Just like I had no idea about this guy. Like, where did he start? Where was his start and all of this kind of stuff? And we covered a lot of that on the podcast. There's a lot to cover. I think the exciting part about today for me is because it was so sort of under the radar at one point.
Right.
It's definitely above the radar, and things that people were like, yeah, that seems like it was a long time ago, maybe a little far-fetched, and what was really going on. Well, now it's right in people's faces.
Right.
And you were really at the front end of this a long time ago. We're going to talk about a lot of that stuff today.
Sure.
And you've been in a lot of places talking to a lot of people trying to get the message out. And this is just one more opportunity for me to kind of catch up with all the things you've been doing as busy as you've been. So thanks again for coming in today.
No, this is great. And it's ironic. It has been almost a year to the day. And I remember it was this time last winter. You hadn't had the podcast that long. Nope. Got to give a shout out to our firefighter buddy, Prene, for connecting us. And he said, you got to be on this podcast. Scott wants you on. I'm like, where is this place? And I mean, I went to San Jose State, brother, for undergrad and grad. I could walk to school from your studio. Right. So, and that conversation happened at such a good time because the second edition of my latest book, Hidden More, as you know, wasn't quite public yet. You got one of the, kind of the advanced copies.
It's right there on my shelf. I've read it
there
twice.
It is. Oh, man. Yeah, the first and second edition. I did not see that. Oh, that's awesome, man. Thanks. I'm honored. But in the year that's transpired, this thing has become less hidden. And that's been the goal from day one. You guys know from the first talk we had, I became a game warden to stop poachers, to protect wildlife and waterways and wildlands. Never imagined that the focus and the career change would happen in 2005 in our first gunfight, right in these Los Gatos foothills where my partner was shot, as you know from that story. Mm-hmm. Almost didn't survive that. And we found a new environmental enemy here at home that was the most devastating enemy I'd ever seen environmentally and dangerous because they're armed, they're aggressive, they're violent. So, the risks of not coming home as a game warden were very real. I did not realize at the time that this thing would morph into not only a national, but a global problem of what these cartels are doing out of Mexico. And now we can talk about this, which we didn't really dive into because it wasn't such a hot topic yet.
It was just sort of bubbling up.
Just sort of bubbling up. And it was the Chinese element, the Asian, organized crime groups now working hand in hand with the Mexican cartels, and using basically the U.S. and California especially as a wasteland stomping grounds to make their billions of cash dollars, destroy our environment with stealing water on, clandestine cannabis, illegal cannabis, and all the other things that go along outside of the cannabis realm. So since we had that talk, the second book has done very well. It's outsold the first book by 5 times. We're like 27,000 copies. Most of those, as I was talking to Eli before starting our podcast today, we're on Audible. We're not reading many books anymore. We're listening to books or we're listening to podcasts, right? I think these are the two best mediums now is the podcast element because the way we expose this issue and the work I'm doing and so many of my brothers and sisters in this world and that are part of our Thin Green Line. And as you know, you're a brother, you're part of the Thin Green Line. You're born and raised here. You're outraged by the issue. You're teaching and promoting and having guests on for preparedness, self-survivability, whether it's firearms training, physical fitness, some of those things we talked about before, which I think have never been more important in the country today, that we do need to be ready for anything and live the best life we can without being paranoid or in fear, but be prepared. And given what the cartels are doing throughout the nation right now, everybody needs to be prepared. And that is, we don't say that lightly.
Yeah, that's something that popped up for me in a different way. People that sort of, if they listen to the story or they know the story a little bit of how I got into this, the question comes up a lot because, as you mentioned, like here we are sitting in the gym. How did I get to be at the table with John Norris talking about drug cartels and preparedness? It really started in being in sort of a major metropolitan area and being impacted or affected by a lot of the things that you were combating early, but before I even knew who you were. And literally, as we've stated many times, like right in our backyard. Sure. I mean, within 1 to 2 air miles of where I was living in some cases and at periods of time. And now, you've said this before. I think the way you describe it is if you go 10 air miles outside of this Silicon Valley, you are exposed. You are out there and there's just all this open stuff. Yeah. And so I think the people in the things happen there that ultimately come into the major metropolitan area. And during lockdowns for, the COVID-19 thing, we got hit really hard here in Santa Clara County. This was one of the toughest counties in the state of California. Yeah. They were kind of leading the way in terms of restriction. And as a gym owner, we got hit really hard. And part of that was when you lock down businesses and places are vacant, it generally attracts people to kind of hang out in those vacant places that wouldn't typically be there because there's people there generally. And we're in a downtown area. And so that was kind of the first thing. And I started to see the drug problems that already existed escalate at a level, it was mind-boggling.
Exponential.
Mind-boggling.
Yeah.
I mean, because I was walk to work every day when, I just lived 2 blocks from work. And all of a sudden, it was like you're seeing it on the street. And it's not like there's homelessness, there's clear psychiatric crisis, and then there's a lot of times somewhere in the middle with what you'll see is addiction. And I've learned a lot in the last year, particularly in the last couple of months with some of the things that have happened here locally. But the point of this is how disconnected people were or are from how it gets to where it's at.
Right.
And where we are now. And now I think people that maybe wanted to ignore it, had their head buried in the sand, or just chose to think differently or think it was something that it wasn't.
Right.
It's now hitting them smack in the face. Yeah. And in some cases in the jaw, in the sense that it's literally in their front yard.
Right.
And they're now like, oh my gosh, this is a problem. I'm calling law enforcement to come deal with it. And they're like, look, I'm going to do my job, but I just want to prepare you for probably what the reality of this is going to be. They're probably going to be right back here.
Yeah.
Anyhow, again, I know you've been on the front lines for a very long time, been warning people through books, podcasts, film, that kind of thing. And here we are, we're still talking about it. Only now I think people maybe be a little bit more receptive to the realities of what's going on.
100%. No, you hit it on the head. And right now, with the border crisis, and we're at an all-time high breaking point on that. We're at, approximately, last calculation was 2.4 million, illegal crossings or interactions with border control as far as the illegal crossings going. But since we talked a year ago, what the cartels are doing down there and the escalation we've had, not only on the southern border, but the northern border as well, it definitely has escalated because we're not changing policy under the current administration. We're being told that money is being thrown down through press conferences from the current administration at the highest level to deal with the border. But that's just seems to be to send more border agents down there to process more illegal immigration issues, get more people in, and whether that's for votes or whatever is going on, I think we can read between the lines on some of this stuff because the damage that's being done at the border, let's not even look at cartel crimes. Let's just talk about that many people crossing the border across those waterways, across those desert areas. And it's interesting, as you know, I was invited to testify in Congress in October, just a few months ago.
Yes.
In the Natural Resources Committee. Awesome opportunity, a little bit, frightening going to testify.
I want to hear about this.
Yeah. And the reason I'm bringing it up is it's gonna rope into what happened in Congress and what we learned there and where those committees are now. Those congressional committees are on the border as we speak, dealing with those same issues, trying to see things firsthand. But I was blown away when I started to talk about the Hidden War story, not only for us as game wardens fighting this from an environmental crime standpoint, then being thrown into this cartel thread. And, certainly I get to talk a lot about it. I'm retired. We've got good reach with, the helps of brothers like you to get the message out. But we've got 400 plus game wardens in California, with a good percentage of those game wardens working just on this illegal cannabis problem, which still is largely run by not so much the Mexican cartels, but now we've got the Asian, the Hmong, and the Chinese cartels kind of dominating some of that private land stuff. But when we're talking about the border, when you're taking millions or hundreds of thousands of people a week, hitting those impact points, you're having an environmental impact. And that came up in Congress right away. I was the last of 5 panelists to testify. And I was seated with a chief of one of the tribes down there experiencing, his sacred burial grounds in a Native American tribe being decimated by these crossers. And then we had an immigration attorney on immigration studies on impacts of border crossings and how that affects the environment, how that affects public safety, reiterating the same thing we know that I'm telling on the hidden war front, but to see it from all these different angles and have the congressional committee not be aware of those numbers. And after I told our story, and it's up on my YouTube page, as you know, there's an edit of the testimony that's told the story and then the Q&A. And there were some really good questions generated by that committee, bipartisan. And a lot of it were, we know what's going on the border with these cartels. Why am I just hearing about this tainted cannabis in the Silicon Valley and all over California? And now you're Maine, you're Michigan, you're Oregon, you're Washington, you're all these different states. I mean, this is everywhere, Lieutenant. We had no idea. I want to see more on this. I want to see more investigative news. I want to see a documentary, a film. I don't care, but why? I want to hear more of this story, because this is showing how the border problem is impacting the whole country. And that's the reason I was asked by Congressman Gosar, who's the chair of that, who's is conservationist, met him at Safari Club International when I was doing seminars down there at the SCI in Nashville. And he was one of the first legislative senators or congressmen to sit through my Hidden War seminar. Usually their aides do. And then they hit me up after and go, hey, that was mind-blowing. I want to introduce you to my boss, and we want to have you tell more of this story and get this out there so we can attack it better from a policy standpoint. But Gosser, God bless him, was the one guy who sat through it with Rory, with his aide, and right away was like, no one knows this. We need to get this. And it happened. And it came out of the blue. And I was really, really, really grateful for, one, the opportunity and the receptiveness of it to get it out on that national forum. And now many other border control bills are being generated. Many of the same congressional committee members that I talked to on that panel are literally on the southern border right now. I saw them on 4 different news channels 2 or 3 nights ago, seeing firsthand what we had talked about previously. So I kind of like that we reverse engineered it. The focus is on the border because that is dramatic and that is devastating to see. But they're coming from our testimony in October based on interior threats. California, and I talked about the nation, not just what the hub here where you and I sit at ground zero, where it started for me and you, but now they're going to the border to see it, but tackling the other issues in the nation, which I love. They're actually showing the depth of it. And what I was really careful to put out there is this emphasis on other crimes besides tainted weed with EPA banned chemicals. That's one thing. But the human trafficking, the child sex trafficking, and I know you and I didn't dive into this a lot.
Yeah, nobody wanted to hear about that stuff.
Nobody wanted to hear about it.
I have an interesting story about that. Please go on.
Yeah. Too dark. And then thank heaven, The Sound of Freedom, that movie dropped. And that movie that was buried in Hollywood could not get distribution for 5 years. When I heard between Tim Ballard and Jim Caviezel and Angel Pictures that finally distributed that film, I remember watching that film with family July 6th of last year. It had come out on July 4th. Oak Ridge Mall, sitting in the old haunt, Oh, is that right? And I know the problem. I mean, we're dealing with the same cartels doing the same business. Yep. I'm not running, just I'm not trying to interdict child sex trafficking rings, obviously, in my purview. But knowing they're all connected, and then that movie really hit it viscerally that people can relate to on such a grand scale. I was squeezing the armrest of that chair so hard, crying my eyes out. I'm like, I'm going to get involved. I'm going back to work. I'm going to get operational.
Yes, I was going to ask you about this.
This is breaking my flipping heart, brother. And I thought, those are the same criminals. Fentanyl.
Right.
And fentanyl's up to what, 120,000 deaths in America a year?
I don't think they can keep up with it.
They can't keep up with it. And same groups. Methamphetamine, the gun running. Mariana Van Zeller, who's been on Joe Rogan a couple of times, and she's awesome. She's got a copy of Hidden War now, dialogued a little bit since she was on his last show when Hidden War was mentioned from Joe, which helped us. And she's doing such great things with her Trafficked series on Hulu and Nat Geo. And the stuff she's seen and embedding with these cartels and how easy it is to get across the border to run guns, from America down there for the cartel war. There's all these different elements we're just not seeing as this big multi-billion, not million, multi-billion dollar black market money generator for these guys. And that's what we talked about in Congress. We said, don't just look at this as an environmental thing that game wardens are fighting. Don't look at it as just destroyed water, which we're near and dear. I mean, that's our hub. But consider it a national eco-terrorism war inside these borders going on by these individuals on both sides of the border, running with impunity under the current situation in the U.S. And I don't think there's a more important domestic threat that we have to tackle as a national priority. And as you know, Scott, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, we're not fully, under the current administration, attacking this as a national priority, as if we were being attacked by an overt fighting force in combat. And that's all our border agents on the border seeing this, all our brothers and sisters working it, our game wardens out there dealing with cannabis issues all over private and public land here in California and now multiple other states. We're playing whack-a-mole. We can't keep up.
You just nailed it on that last bit there with regard to how we're not attacking the problem. And we're not, there's a couple of things that came up for me in there. One, just with your experience and kind of where this started in California, it seems many things tend to start in California and the rest of the country wants to ignore that or downplay it or say, it's just weird out in California. Look, it is weird in California. Like, it's one of the great parts about California is like, we're going to stay weird. Yeah. But sometimes it gets a little bit out there. And as long as, man, you can have places and people know those places. They know about Berkeley. They know about San Francisco. And even within Berkeley and San Francisco, you can nail it down even further. Like you go into like the Haight Nashbury area. You go into the Castro area. Like it gets extra weird in some levels. And I use weird in quotation marks, weird as other people relate to it. Yeah. And so as long as it stays, everybody's kind of fine with it. And, they choose not to go there, deal with it, or they can sit from a distance and cast stones or make whatever judgments. But whatever happens in California tends to spread, and it including literally and figuratively wildfire, right? It moves at a very rapid pace, and so people are sitting out there just kind of like, oh, whatever, it's just California. It should, the earthquake should happen, and it should, wash away into the Pacific Ocean. Yeah, I hear you. I get what you're saying, but you were dealing with this stuff that we are seeing now at a quote unquote smaller scale decades ago, right? We're going back decades. Yeah. And this is where we are now. And so it was, nobody wanted to talk about it. We'll come back to the human trafficking thing on this. But then the second part of this is, for me, is based on, like what your job was, right? Yeah. Your job was to help manage a few different things. And one of those is this conservation of the ecosystems that we live in as humans and other organisms live in humans, or live in, on the planet. And if you disrupt that, or if you allow it to be disrupted, and it almost invariably always comes down to the human element that does this. For sure. Yeah. Mother Nature and planet Earth tend to work itself out pretty well. Right. Like read a book, right? Look at some history. It's usually the humans that mess this up. Right. And what your job, again, I don't want to overstep my bounds here, but you're looking at it going, this is a problem over here. This is an invasive species that's moving into here. Maybe it got shipped in on fishing boats or, like on a farmer's field and some irrigation water, something that came in, some foreign thing comes in, and now it's messed it up. And we've got to get a handle on this. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to get it back. Exactly. And so I want to be careful about the way I say this, but this is a very good comparison and contrast. And that is what's happening at the border. And now what we're experiencing both ecologically, but obviously from an economic perspective and an environmental impact for the ecosystems that exist in our cities across America. And what you're seeing is a massive disruption in so many ways, and at a level that is beginning to look a bit out of control. And I think, and I'll get off my soapbox here, is I don't know if there's even a question in this, because I think we're on the same page with a lot of this, is what I see is, you talk about the attack and or how you attack the problem. I'm not saying the people are bad, right? I want to be really careful about this. And I've never heard you say that either. So I want to go on record, right?
Right.
It's not what we're talking about. We're talking about there is a problem here that has to be recognized. And until we get away from this continual focus on principles and values, and we start looking at changing behaviors, we will not solve this problem. At some point, this, we have to look out for these people and their misfortunes and the things they're going through. I don't disagree. I think there's a process for doing that. But what are we doing to control the flow and make sure that the principles and values and what you say is happening can be measured, and is it working or not? Because right now, I don't think it's very fair, or no business in the world would operate this way. But I don't think it's very fair that the people on the inside that get to talk about principles and values all the time and make these rules and not attack the problem that are elected for the people, by the people, if you will, they get to make the rules on whether and decide whether or not they're being successful or not.
Right.
This is very odd to me. Like that, oh no, we're doing a great job. Really? Because I can walk outside my front door right now and I can show you that we have a massive problem here. Yeah, well, but we have to do these things and this will get better. Yeah, you've been saying that for a long time. Sure. And now we're at a point where my business is being threatened. My livelihood is being threatened. Right. My safety is being threatened. So are my customers. That's why they don't want to come down here anymore. All of those things. So I say all that to say, like, what the things, like, again, in terms of why should you listen to John? Because John saw this shit happening decades ago.
Yeah.
And he wrote books about it. And he stood in front, and he sat in front of Congress. He's been telling you about it. And at no point has he ever said, I told you so. He's just trying to give you information. And I think you've been deafened, to the masses. And this goes back to, we don't have to talk about this now, but the human trafficking piece and even my own experiences with that. Like, this is what it turns into. These guys have a vertical model on the entire billion-dollar industry.
Big time.
From the bottom to the top.
Yeah.
And nobody is disrupting that at all. And it looks to me, and I think to a lot of other people, that we're actually supporting this.
That's a perfect point. And you just hit it on the head, brother, when you say we're supporting this, whether it's intentional or unintentional, we are incentivizing the problems we have coming across that border.
Wild.
And we're incentivizing. Well,
it's wild.
That same congressional committee that I testified to in October, that I just set her down on the border, there was a news bite the other night, and it came down, Sinaloa, Jalisco New Generation, all those cartels down there that are getting all these people that are paying these cartels to come across, flooding certain checkpoints so other points are open to get folks across. And these people with nothing.
These are strategies and tactics.
Yeah, it's strategies and tactics. It's like, flood a problem, and you're gonna find the holes that leak, and you're gonna go through the holes and flow with the flow, right? So they are generating $33 million a week is what these cartels are making from the illegal border crossings that we've incentivized by a lack of a strong border control. So not only are we bringing all these folks in, and some are chasing the American dream, I get that, and we are a melting pot, and that's awesome.
Right.
But what about the 300-400 terrorist watch list suspects that are coming across with impunity? And now we got these military-age Chinese males with passports from China that are squared away. And
we just had a huge incident. Well, we can go back to that.
I want to hear it, yeah. And they're coming into this country, and then we're finding them running grow operations in Siskiyou County, LA County. They've taken over and worked with the Sinaloa cartels now and said, hey, we'll take over the private land stuff. We want to do the weed thing because we want cash money. We got a plan here, and we're going to supply you guys an ally now, and we're going to give you the fentanyl precursor drugs, chemicals, and the precursor chemicals you need for methamphetamine. So you want to poison America within, we're all for it. This is China directly. They are working hand in hand now, Scott. And what's happening is, so America now is that middle ground for billions of cash dollars in a cannabis industry that is cash only, because it's not federally backed. None of this money's in banks. It's not digitally, quantified or trackable. So China now is amassing a ton of money they can launder and not even go to the homeland. And this just came from my friends over at DEA. In fact, Bill Bodner, great guy who we just had on our Thin Green Line podcast. I host the Thin Green Line and Warden's Watch, as you know, with my co-host Wayne Saunders out of New Hampshire. We had Bill back because he had just retired. He actually was the first federal agent at his level. He was a SAC, special agent in charge of the whole Los Angeles office of the DEA, running 4 or 5 of the southwestern states, dealing with Mexico. Great guy, and wanted to get this message out. So not only is he a friend, but he's wired right to tell the story honestly, and he retired like a month ago. So we had him on, and we talked about this China connection and what's going on, and it's mind-blowing. You're looking at geopolitics for the Chinese potentially amassing so much black market money in America to have that World Bank takeover in 2035. There's that talk of that plan that goes into so far beyond just cartels and crimes in America and America being the victim. But now we're looking at a global takeover potentially down the road in the master plan.
We're complicit.
Well, we're totally complicit, and our people are suffering. Because if we're eroding people with fentanyl deaths and addiction, methamphetamine, and our people are being trafficked all over the country, and child sex trafficking is happening in America. And if you don't have clandestine cannabis in your backyard in, say, I don't know, Ohio, let's take that as just an example, you have people on the lookout to traffic your children. You have methamphetamine and fentanyl in all 50 states. These things are happening, and that money is being made on the black market. It's not traceable. I mean, $33 million a week, bud, going on right now. Cartels are going, this is great, man. We love this chaos.
Business is good.
Business is good.
Business
Culture
is
of chaos. Business is good. So until we as a populace in America unite enough, and our legislators,
there you have it.
And all we can do is we can lead the horse. Are they going to drink? I don't know. I know I got amazing feedback in Congress from both sides of the fence. The questions were good, but I also saw a little bit of an overwhelming, okay, what next? We got the border, but it doesn't stop at the border. And, we talk about solutions of what can improve your safety in downtown San Jose right here, the hub of the tech capital of the world. Here we are in San Jose, at your studio, your gym. And, you have safety issues outside. We have the fire that just happened to your RV, which we talked a little bit off campus.
Yeah, I can tell you that story.
But I got to hear that story. But we definitely need to look at this thing as a priority nationally. And I think you said that California is always ground zero for something, good or bad. And I think I mentioned this the first time on the podcast is we're the weed state of the world. So I know the cannabis world, that's stay in your lane, right? I know that from a illegal and legal standpoint. I know really good growers that are DEM certified, that are going through distribution, they're conserving water, they're exemplary. And now we have the problem with a regulation structure, as you know, that's running them out of business because the black market is killing them.
It's a major failure.
It's a major failure. So the only people that should be growing cannabis and selling it are getting out of the business, and the Chinese and Mexican cartels are taking over. So we blew that with an opportunity to be the example of not only the nation, but the world with Prop 64, because we're that Mediterranean weed climate, the weed state of the world, and we blew it. Now, why can't we turn that around? I mean, maybe I'm a simpleton that way, but it's like, hey, there have been modification proposals from legislative groups and lobbyists to say, hey, change the law, modify Prop 64, continue to regulate cannabis in a good way, but put the bite back into these illegal transnational criminal organizations, incentivized to take over towns, to steal water where you don't have, your farms are drying up, you can't water crops if you've been a farmer for 100 years in Siskiyou County, or you're a rancher and you can't feed your stock. Your kids are hearing gunfire every night. You're seeing guys going up and down the road with guns. Who wants to live in that rural America? That's not the rural America we signed on for.
No, and it's not what it is. But again, you just said it like it's rural America. So when you look at like that 25% of American population votes and makes decisions for 100% of the population, and those are major. Those that mainly comes out of major metropolitan areas. When we start to look at the electoral college and things like that, you can kind of see how the head has been in the sand, like this isn't impacting me now. And I think the question you're asking, like, why can't we make this happen? I think that would mean a couple of things, which to me, like, if you're a true leader, this is not a hard thing to do. And it's one, admit that you messed it up.
Right.
Like, it's step number one. We messed this up.
We're human. We make mistakes.
We made a mistake.
It's okay to own it.
We need to fix it. Right. And here's what we've learned. Tell us what you did learn. Tell us what the mistake was and where those points are. Have accept accountability for it and have other people come in that aren't just talking about principles and values and trying to earn votes, but are experts like yourself on the ground to teach them how to do this. Education, right? Educate the people to understand what's going on,
Right.
so that they understand what they may be voting for next, so that they can take action.
Right.
Just until the people rise up, as you said, and start to understand that really is the simpleton formula, if you want to look at it that way. I don't really think it is. That really what that is really true democracy
Sure.
in the way that the Constitution in the United States was formed at the end of the day. It's just gotten so far. There's just so many other influences that go into decision-making now, or more importantly, I think not just making decisions to handle the problems at hand for fear that they're going to hurt somebody's feelings, and that they would have to admit that they messed this up, or whatever the case. I think you mentioned a couple of things there just about safety and the things like you mentioned the fentanyl issue. I don't think there's many people in the United States that don't know somebody through, at least 3 points of connection that's been impacted by this.
Sure.
So it's not like, and before we were hearing about it, everybody was scared of it. It was kind of like when we look back in the 80s with the crack epidemic.
Right.
Like,
That's a good analogy.
It's bad. It's really bad.
Yeah.
Drugs are bad. Don't do drugs.
Right.
Just say no. Nancy Reagan, whole 9 yards. But until it came to your front door, you didn't really actually understand what that really meant.
Yeah.
You were just trying to kind of avoid the problem. Well, now the problem is here. I saw it firsthand here. I mean, in a way that really, really disturbed me, because to me, it's preventable to some extent. When you look back at history again, what California's done, shutting down all of our psychiatric institutions at one point, that started decades ago, right? When I was a kid, right? You take away, you take away those resources. Number one, you put people out on the street. You leave them to their own devices. Then you have people where you have these more private institutions, some public, where you have addiction specialists, psychiatric specialists that can deal with folks as they're having issues. And then you do this thing called Prop 47 or whatever it was. I may have the number wrong there, where you call it the Safe Schools Act.
Right.
But the reality of it is you just made all of this stuff legal, and it made sending where basically your choice was, if you got arrested, on crime and you were addicted, here's your choice. You can go to jail or get treatment.
Right.
Well, everybody chose treatment, and there were facilities and things for people to go to, and at least they had a roof over their head, right? And they were getting some type of a resource, but they didn't want to go to jail, right? And again, the pendulum swung way one direction.
That was their option,
But there wasn't just a slap on the wrist and turn. Now the option is like you can. There is no jail. You can get treatment, or you can go back to doing drugs, or you can go back to the street and doing what you're doing.
You've done nothing to help that.
It's only gotten worse. So again, that's a bigger thing that the people here in California need to understand more, kind of how we got to where we are. It's bigger and worse than it ever was. And then the plan was, now that we have this out there, I tell you what, we'll solve this homeless crisis by just building more affordable housing. That idea is a 10 or 15-year-old idea. We're now at the stress point. We have some affordable housing, but we have exponentially more people that need housing, and they can't afford it. And even if they wanted to be there, which is a whole other thing, because in order to do that, there are some rules. Yeah. So, you can't. You have to be in a treatment program if you're going to take advantage of this housing. Oh, I don't really want to do that. And it's also not. At the same time, it's also okay just to park my RV on the street and live in it and dump my trash and my sewage and whatever else, because being homeless isn't illegal, or it's not a crime. It shouldn't be a crime. Right. But it's also not appropriate for people to live on the streets of America, particularly here in this city here in California. So what are we doing to make it a little less appropriate and fix things? And I don't think so. When we go back to this whole thing with what's going on at the border, right? The whole thing that's going on with what has been going on with drug trafficking, human trafficking, sex trafficking, child trafficking, and all those things. How in the world would somebody expect any of that to get better if what you've been describing and what I just probably bumbled through with regard to a little bit of at least California history, how would you expect any of this to be better? And then what are you going to do as a citizen when this shows up to your front door, which is what it's doing right now, outside of complaining and outside of expecting somebody else to do it for you? I don't know. I don't think there's an answer for that right now, but I don't know. Maybe you want to weigh in on that somehow.
No, I think
a lot of stuff.
It brings up, the ultimate conflict of what are we prioritizing anywhere. And I think everyone's like, it's so freaky. There's so much money involved. There's so much homeless. There's so much drugs. We have the cartel issue. We have proxy wars going on that we're involved in. We have all these national hot button issues, right? And they've just escalated since COVID and lockdowns. And you said it beautifully when you said here in Santa Clara County, and I was in California when lockdown started. And I think I told you, I don't know if we talked about it on the last show, but left California 2 weeks earlier than planned because of fear of border shutdowns. Lockdowns.
We did talk about that.
Yeah, because in the home state of Montana, we were one of those counties that didn't lock down anything. Everybody, played safe, but we didn't have mask mandates. Businesses stayed open. We were just careful.
It was a different world there.
It was a different world.
I visited there actually during that time.
And it kind of blew my mind because, there's still a lot of home in Cali in the percentage of the year that we spend here. But the thing that's crazy, man, is you brought up so many points that overwhelm so many people where they're just going to get to an overload point in their head and go, I can't process any more of this right now because I got to just deal with what I'm dealing with, take care of my kids, get them to school, try to get them there safely where they don't, try fentanyl or get abducted on the way. This is kind of overload.
Where do I start?
But I think I've always been a black and white kind of guy where you can be black and white in a very gray area. I look back on the 80s and the 90s and what were we focusing on to combat drugs or to combat terrorism threats or whatever the case may be. If everyone is made generally aware of the basics, whether they participate in the solution or not, and we put not only funding, but really good programs to it, again, like the cartel fight as a priority to the homeless fight, you just named, we're talking about two, what I think you and I both consider of domestic priorities.
Issues, yes.
Homelessness and what the homeless are dealing with, however they got there, is horrible. How do we solve that problem? Well, let's make it a priority because I can tell you right now, the priorities of where we're putting money nationally and internationally right now is pretty clear. The money talks. And when you're putting billions into the Ukraine,
billions,
and what's really going down on the border, what are we really facilitating with the money we are putting down there? Because I can tell you, talking to border agents and dealing with friends on that side, and then dealing with the backlash and the end washed result of what's happening on the border here internally, and it's still happening. And I've got fresh examples, and since the year we've talked of the things we'll talk about here in a minute up north and in LA, but it just needs to be prioritized. And everybody needs to know it's a priority. And I think about the Reagan administration back in the day, and my buddy Jack Carr just put up his exit speech in 1989 that's 20 minutes long. And I remember listening to it. I actually listened to most of it on the way here. And I thought, Reagan called it pretty honest. He called it pretty direct, what government should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing, and what the people need to know and what we need to take care of in our own nation. And I think right now, the special individualistic interests, wherever those may sit, regardless of what party we're part of, are driving the bus, and the people of this country are not driving any bus. I mean, there's no driver because we're getting told so many different things that are not solving anything. And those of us that are on the ground are seeing what's really happening. And until that is prioritized and admitted that there's a problem, that we failed on this, we failed on the cannabis regulation issue in California as an example, so we're going to fix it. That's not impossible. But maybe it's not good for votes. Maybe it's not good for revenue. Maybe it's not good for next position. And I've said it 1,000 times in writing and talks, when politics and individual goals take the place of public safety and environmental,
recipe for disaster.
It's a recipe for disaster. When you're not thinking about the country as a whole and you're thinking about, your little fiefdom and where your feet are stepping and not 5 steps ahead, like we should be thinking globally for our children and grandchildren, we've lost before we've started. Yeah, and that's the mindset right now of where we're at politically, and it's heartbreaking.
I see just sort of the escalation. We mentioned California being sort of the ground zero for so many things, and we've kind of alluded or talked on a few of them. and mention them, but we've talked about the border. You just mentioned being down on the border, talking to those border agents, U.S. Border Patrol agents. Obviously overwhelmed.
Beyond,
Obviously
understatement
overwhelmed.
for sure.
At what point do they have a problem staffing up? And what are you signing on for as a Border Patrol agent now? What is that job now as compared to maybe what it was 5 years ago?
Right.
What are you doing? And again, when we come back to the statement of principles and values, I believe, and I want to believe, the majority of people getting into some type of law enforcement, whether it be state, municipal, federal, whatever, they have a strong sense of principles and values of why they're taking that job. Now, that's not everybody, right?
Sure.
But I think when you get into that, like, what am I signing up for? What am I actually doing? Especially if I'm taking an oath, right? At the beginning of this to protect, serve. We talk about, the integrity of the United States and those kind of things. What are they going through? And then also what they're being faced with just on a daily basis and some of the horrific stuff that's going on down there and what they're seeing and what they're being exposed to. And I say this because I've had, this turns into a question here, but I say this because I've had so much interaction with law enforcement over the last several years and kind of watching what's happened in the institution of law enforcement for several reasons. And it's no one thing, it's a multitude of things. But as a result, there are some things that I've seen that I think we can probably put our finger on a lot of times. But one of those things was, first off is, what is the job now versus what it used to be? And that's not that law enforcement and enforcing the law has changed, but how you do it has changed. Like, things have evolved, right? And you have to evolve to those things. But when does it become, when does it go from law enforcement to, like, all we're doing is pushing the problem down the street? This is what's criminal, what isn't. I mean, as a society, we've decided this is a crime and this isn't a crime. And this is the punishment for the crime if you do the crime. And this is what happens after you've paid, if you've done your time or whatever and you come out. These are the things that can impact you. And none of that's a perfect system, but it does create some type of order and structure that can be followed. But that seems to be getting lost. And it seems to be a different game all the time. And what that does, I think for folks, when I talk to law enforcement officers, like, especially the guys that have been on, say, 10 or more years, because they've kind of seen, this is women and men that have been on for a while. What I see happening with this, and all of this relates, all of this filters into this at some level, because it's what they're dealing with every day on the street, between the law-abiding citizen who's just trying to get through their day and keep their kids off drugs and get them to school and everything that you described to the horrific stuff and the career predatory felons that are out there. So there's a big gap. There's a lot of room in between there to be talking about. But what I see happening with them is them not being sure because their leadership isn't sure. Right. And because that's what they're projecting. And they're being told to do things that they weren't doing before, which sounds a little bit off, and it sounded a little bit off, but we're going to trust these guys. Right. We're going to trust the leadership that they're doing the right thing. And I don't want to get into trouble here, right? Because look, I'm just trying to do the right thing, which I think most law enforcement, officers get into it for that reason. Yeah. So then when that doesn't work and all they ever hear is what a poor job they're doing, or when something comes up that they have to address right there in a split second after being overworked, underpaid, either wearing too many hats, there's not enough help to get there, and then they do something, that is the thing that gets brought to the table, and then their career is on the line, their integrity is on the line, their personal stuff is on the line, whatever else, and that demoralizes people, right? Yeah. To the extent it was like, yeah, I could address that over there, but I'm not gonna, because I'm just kind of done, and I'm really not sure where I'm going with this. And what is the ultimate impact of that down the line? We're seeing it, and the citizens and the public are the ones that end up paying for this. And so that's at the border. But you mentioned a couple of things, like, so now it starts to move into places like the Central Valley in California, where we have this, all of a sudden, that a building gets inspected because some people see some water lines coming up out of it. Right. In a little town in Central California, which I'm very familiar with. I used to live in Fresno and do some work in Visalia. Let's just say it's around there. Yeah. And so the city goes out to inspect it and goes, what's going on out there? Yeah. And they get into this warehouse, and it turns into be a illegal Chinese laboratory.
There you go.
Can you talk about this? I mean, you probably have way more insight than this.
No, we can dive in what little I know on it. Yeah, but I know the basics, sure.
But to give some people some insight to, you're saying borders, right? You're saying Chinese cartels. Yeah. You're saying how they're working maybe with Mexican cartels.
Yeah.
How, people are going, come on, man, you watch too much TV. You're watching too much, I don't know, whatever the latest is out there. I don't watch TV or whatever. This is all fiction. It isn't fiction.
No.
Because it's showing up literally in our towns. And again, this isn't San Francisco, Oakland, LA, San Jose towns. These are the little towns that are literally like a couple of hours from these major metropolitan cities. So I bring that up to say, well, do you have any insight on that lab and what's going on with that at this point?
I don't have anything current, but everything that has been, publicly made out and some of the things I've talked to officers about is all true. I mean, it isn't fiction, because the truth is stranger in fiction in this crazy world. And not only that, look at our country and where we're at today and why that lab can even exist. There's little regulation. There's an overwhelming taxation of resources where our law enforcement officers, God bless them for everything they are trying to do, they are to handle 1,000 issues that they're not even seeing. And that's what's happened with the incentivization of Chinese, Mexican cartels, organized transnational criminal organizations, let's call them. If there's a bioweapons lab, or we're working on animals, to create another, COVID, anthrax, Ebola virus or whatever.
Which it appears that's what this thing was doing.
Exactly. That's exactly what it was doing. And to say it wasn't, put your head in the sand. But that's what's going on in that situation. So we have that going on in America. And then you go to Siskiyou County,
go a little further north.
Just go a little further north, and maybe we don't have a biolab in process with animal testing to get those bioweapons going again, here in America, on American soil this time. But now we have the Chinese growers coming in and taking over private land grow sites in the northern California counties, Siskiyou, where we did our documentary, A Daily Caller that we talked about, Narcofornia, good work with Jorge Ventura, my buddy there.
That guy's all over the place.
Yeah, doing great stuff. He's on the border. He's still dealing with the cannabis issue. But even we were blown away by the stuff we saw up there that we thought we knew. And we were running into all the carbofuran, all the banned poisons, all the Asian grows where there's a little side building before you go into the grow house with a Tyvek hazmat suit they've changed out of, with the N95, fitted breather respirator masks. So they're going in with a hazmat suit to apply chemicals on cannabis for a black market all over the country. And some of this is slipping into dispensaries.
100% is.
We all know that.
Because the dispensaries have got to make money, man.
They've got to make money. Yeah. And they're losing legitimate growers hand and fist every day because people are backing out of it to get that, certified, seed to sale, inspected, all the permits.
There's a will, there's a way.
Where there's a will, there's a way. But what blew me away is we started to get reports, and this came firsthand from Northern California like 4 or 5 months ago. It's that recent since you and I last talked. These Chinese cartels that have come in and taken over these things are now bringing in their own chemicals with Chinese lettering from the homeland, and there's 6 or 7 of them. They're fungicides, they're insecticides, they're rodenticides. Some of them are being described by the experts that are analyzing this stuff on raids and getting, biologists and everything, basically chemical scientists to look at this, more deadly than those carbofuran poisons. And they're not just spraying this stuff on or mixing it in water as a powder and spraying it on the plants and waterways. They're actually putting it in an empty paint can or another container, mixing it up and lighting it on fire as a smudge pot to have a smoke aroma to basically contaminate a whole. How are you going to get a chemical on a product any better than burning it to actually have an aroma vapor of smoke? That's what they're doing. And using these chemical suits, and this stuff is everywhere. Obviously, it's on machinery, it's on water lines, it's all over plants. And that's what our black market cannabis is seeing right now. And in Siskiyou County, it was residents that are downwind of this stuff going into emergency rooms with breathing problems. Growers allegedly showing up, that didn't have the right suit on, or there was a hole in the hazmat suit. Who knows what's going on there?
That we're treating in our hospital.
That we're being treated in the hospital miles and miles away. We know this to be true. And then DEA informs me, and I get to see those chemicals and what they're seeing in Southern California. And that made it into congressional testimony because now DEA had photos of this in, indoor and private land, rural grow sites. Just change the counties, you're seeing the same thing. And you talk about these military-age Chinese males coming up with passports, getting shuttled across by the cartels in cahoots, just like the flooding of all the other crimes going on. And it's not only in California, but we're looking at 5 other states as well. That's nasty, nasty stuff. These guys know how deadly it is. They're actually bringing their own chemicals from China because that's how incentivized and how easy they can get over here to make billions of those cash dollars at the expense of our people, not only on the crime issue, but poisoning, what's going to happen with respiratory deaths or illnesses based on what we're seeing with this new chemical, and a new level that have kind of escalated the problem in the chaos right now of border control and everything we're looking at. And that's just one example. And then you talk about this bioweapons lab and testing on animals in the Central Valley, where I've done a ton of work as well. And absolutely, no doubt that right now, easy to do. It's all connected.
What blew me away about that is that when they started the media started to dig into this. That's where it started. The media got a hold of it, and that part of it is how much money they had received in COVID relief funding. For an illegal business, right? That quote unquote didn't exist, but was owned, and there were multiple entities on this, basically this list of businesses that this Chinese company had owned, and they had received millions of dollars in financial aid. Basically, like the rest of us small businesses were scrambling to keep our businesses open. My gym was closed for a year. My doors were locked, right? Like we're just trying to survive and put food on the table, and so going back to being complicit,
kickbacks,
you're giving them money to develop this stuff and proliferate. And still there's no answers on this. Still, there's no answers on this from the government. Nobody has come forward. There's an assemblyman who's in Congress now. His name's Kevin Kiley. He's been really vocal on this about like, hey, well, I'm not letting this go. He's kind of been a pit bull on this, just in terms of kind of trying to update.
Someone's got to.
But to your point, there are so many things going on. It can easily be missed when you're dealing with the totality of all of it. And again, people are like, like you're picking on one group, or you're only talking about the chemically tainted cannabis, and now we're getting into something else. I don't think people understand how to connect the dots.
Right.
It goes back to the human trafficking piece, and I was talking about this vertical model. Well, these are multi-billion dollar businesses. It takes people to make those things happen, and it takes a lot of really bad people. But it also just takes people that are trying to survive, right? And some of those people that are just trying to survive may have unknowingly found themselves in this business by trying to make a better life in the United States of America and coming across the border and paying somebody to do that. And the next thing you know, they're basically slaves, and they're doing work that they have to do to keep their family safe. And this is what isn't being addressed, man. And going back to, you were talking about the movie that came out, last summer, and how that was very much downplayed, and people didn't want that. It took 5 years for them to even get it into the movie theater.
Right.
I had lots to say about that movie, and it inspired a podcast that I had with the guy that we can talk about a little bit. But my point of this is in saying all this is, people are burying their heads in the sand, maybe out of ignorance, or just like, it's just too much for me. Like you said, like I just can't. They don't have the bandwidth. There's many, many things I think that go into this,
for sure.
And essentially what we're having is, we're not at the end. Nobody's addressing it. You're not addressing it as a citizen. Your leadership, your government, whatever, isn't addressing it, and it's continuing to burn like wildfire. And when you were dealing with this, just say here more locally, and in our national forest and our state forests and our public lands here, there was a little bit more of an element of being hidden. Right. In the sense that you had to get way into the outback in a lot of cases to deal with this. Not all the time, because as you start to uncover it, and you'd go through that in the book, how it's like literally right under your nose. You just had to know how to look and where to look for it. But there was a different element of violence then. And the things that you guys had to prepare for as a unit, as a tactical unit, to go in and combat these things. And a lot of times you were sneaking up on stuff. Now it's like they can do this stuff in plain sight. And it's almost being, we talk about hoop houses and things like that down in the lower part of the state. in the stealing of the water. Can you expand on that? Because the last time we talked, that wasn't even being talked about, man.
It really wasn't. Yeah, it was. And when I dove in with the Daily Caller guys, I knew it was going on, talking to colleagues, my alma mater from the Cannabis Enforcement Program, my Met brothers and sisters. And but I hadn't been in a grow site since I retired in 2018. And then fast forward to, last year,
right?
And we're doing the Narcofornia documentary. I'm back with Siskiyou County Sheriff's deputies and Jeremiah LaRue. What a great sheriff up there, man. Young guy, just fighting the fight.
A lot of piss and vinegar in that, dude.
Yeah, and he's got very limited resources, dedicated, great officers.
He had a few nice things to say about the governor.
Yeah, he has a lot of things to say there for sure. He's getting no help. So he's fighting the fight. Right. He's, doing, but he's fighting a fight that really represents all of us, just like we're doing on the Hidden War message.
That's my point.
That's the point. He's a great example of basically a ground zero that's just on fire, and use it as an example, And when I went up there and we did 3 warrants that day, and it was a Friday, and I heard it from all the officers. It's like, guys I worked with back when it was mostly outdoor trespass in the forest, and we'd raid cartel grows and kit up and do what we needed to do. And talking to all his officers, that's gone away for the most part. It's still out there, but to a much lesser extent, which is a good thing for waterway destruction and, remote environmental impacts being alleviated up in the pristine forest. But have we escalated the problem and made it worse? Because now what you just said, brother, is we're in plain sight and we're concentrated. So we have 10 to 15,000 grow operations in Siskiyou County as an example. Talk LA County.
Is that right? That many?
Yeah, that many.
Wow.
You talk LA County, and Bill Bodner goes into this and sent me a bunch of pictures that I still use today from operations we've all done as allied agencies. But when DEA's part of it, they're looking at, I call it the Bezos Amazon warehouse, it's example wild. Of these hoop houses that look like
a distribution center.
There's maybe 300 of them, and they're stacked together like they're in a industrial strip mall, and a water truck looks like a dot that's coming in illegally every hour, taking water truck loads of water.
Where's that water coming from?
It's coming from fire hydrants. It's coming from city water sources. Some of it's being legally, purchased. Most of it is not. In Siskiyou County, it's all illegal water. It's well drilling operations and rigs on properties locked into something that the Chinese or the Mongs have bought for strictly cannabis production. And then they dig an illegal well, they tap into the underground aquifer. And when we saw that going on, and we only hit 3 out of thousands, and that's all Siskiyou County and the help they get from Department of Fish and Wildlife, my old teammates in cannabis enforcement, the water board, the cannabis control group, whatever, they are playing whack-a-mole. And I think the analogy I like to say is, you guys are making a couple cases a week. That's great. You're saving a couple million gallons of water. You're putting one business kind of out. You're eliminating the problem. But that's a misdemeanor. Unless you get them on human trafficking, or you get them on some felonies with other weapons, or, banned poisons, and maybe you do, maybe you don't, or get the conspiracy and major water crimes that you can prove, it's a slap on the wrist, and they're going to go do operations on 20 or 30 other grows they're responsible for.
Or you just push the problem down the street, is essentially what you're saying.
What is it in standard business, right? Acceptable loss. Mm-hmm. You put out advertising money, or, you put out outreach money, and you never get that back. Cost of doing business. But it's a drop in the bucket to the hundreds of millions of dollars you're going to make or more in cash.
Would you say they were making on the border a day?
$33 million a week. And we're talking about multi-billion dollars in cash, Scott, all that can be laundered in America that doesn't even have to see the homeland, south or north. And the other thing that came up in that recent conversation with Bill was the Mexican cartels, Sinaloa, Jalisco New Generation, Gulf Cartel, whatever cartels you're talking about south of the border, typically 6% of all of their illegal profits, so 6% of billions of dollars is what they have to pay to launder their money and get it clean. Right now, with this collaboration with China and what's happening in America, costs them nothing. Both sides are benefiting. They're not charging each other.
100% profit.
They're getting rich on eroding us. And that's bullshit.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's got to stop. And I agree with you. So it's so hard to fathom all of this in a big picture. I talk cannabis to people in the hidden where they're like,
they just minimize it, man.
They minimize
it.
It's
just weed, man. Shouldn't be a big deal.
Exactly.
Right?
And I keep coming back. I go, let's not look at it as weed. And this question came up in congressional testimony. One great congressman from the Arizona border came back and said, Lieutenant, what do you say to the person that says, I don't use cannabis. My kids aren't going to use cannabis. I'm not near a dispensary. I've never seen this problem. Why should I be concerned about this? I said, well, whether you do or not, whether this threatens your waterway or whether you have illegal cartels potentially doing public safety harm in your backyard, you don't live in California, you don't live in a state that has this going on yet. You want your kids to get safely to school and not be abducted into a ring of sex trafficking, I'm sure. You don't want your kids to potentially take an Oxycontin look-alike pill that's actually a fentanyl-laced, dirty lab generated from Mexico pill. And, they're a star athlete. They're doing great stuff. They took it for pain relief because they injured their knee because they're a varsity football player or she's a varsity soccer player. And next thing you know, she goes, into her bedroom at night to study because she's an AP student here in the Silicon Valley, and mom can't wake her up in the morning because she died. That literally happened to a friend of mine here in the Silicon Valley in the Los Altos Hills just like a year ago. So you said, we all know somebody that's connected. And this isn't just like, the underscourge, right, of the black market or the impoverished people being affected by fentanyl. This is everybody. So it's a hard thing to stomach. But to your point on Sound of Freedom, on that movie, and I keep coming back to Hollywood can do so much junk, but they can take the ability to reach people viscerally, emotionally, spiritually, and outreach people. What does a good film do? It moves us, right? It moves us positively or negatively. And you never saw this. I mean, Hollywood didn't even want to put this out because they thought it was going to be too shocking. And what did it do? It's the highest rated. It's blown up worldwide for the year, and people are outraged and wanting to get on, they want to get on NGOs. They want to go rescue kids. They want to donate money. So I keep coming back. If we need to attack it that way, edutainment is fine, but we got to get more people committed to the big picture and just everybody understand you're affected whether you like it or not. Maybe not directly, but if you care about your family and you care about your community, and I know you and I know everybody in this studio right now that are with us and everybody in this town, we love America. We don't take it for granted. This country even at its worst, this country gives us so much that you can't have. I mean, I've been all over Baja, Mexico, racing on the Baja circuit, seen what those small communities have to deal with as far as resources, beautiful people, been all over Europe, traveled most of the world. And I keep coming back to ground zero right here in America. Even at its worst day, I'm like, I'll take it.
Right.
I can go out all day. But we're a critical mass of this not even being our country as we see it and not even safe to be in. And just look, everybody just needs to realize that they are affected. They don't have to dive into the weeds. They don't have to make it an obsessive priority of having to get all the research, but just be aware. Awareness is everything to preparedness, as you know.
Yep.
I'm preaching to the choir. You're beautiful at doing that from fitness. Prepare yourself. Prepare yourself with the knowledge you need. Prepare for the worst. Live your best life and expect the best. And, I say, to quote a Friday Night Lights, man, high school football and everything, clear eyes, full heart.
Right.
Don't regret what you're doing. Clear eyes, full heart. I'm at my best when I'm in the woods. The woods are my church, as you know. And honestly, when I get pessimistic, dude, I mean.
That was Dad's quote, right?
Yeah, it totally was. And it became our family quote. But I come back to the only time I'm not overwhelmed. This is depressing sometimes.
It is.
I live it. I breathe it. You do. We're out here trying to put out good messages because we care about our nation. We care about our community. We care about our families. And we don't want that to go away for the benefit of everybody. I'm not just looking selfishly at myself. I don't think anybody in this room or in this country, or hypocritically or not, are going to say, oh, I want to go live in, Sinaloa. I want to go live in Michoacan. I want to go live in, Siberia or some part of Russia. No. You got it here. So that's the thing. But when I start getting pessimistic, I go back to the woods and I put a rifle on my back and I get on the ranch and I breathe the air that Silicon Valley has offered in the early days. And I look at Tule elk that, I've protected. I look at the wild hog issue. I get my head on right and I go, this is why I'm here.
So important.
We got to protect this for everybody, man. Whether they everybody gets it or not, we got to protect for everybody. And I think you look at 7 crimes and they're affecting Americans: cannabis, fentanyl, meth, gun running, human trafficking, child sex trafficking, and there's other crimes going on, cyber crimes and crypto fraud. I mean, the cartels are good. They're like a good contracting business, and their subs are great. They're a tier 1 Silicon Valley contracting crew, and this guy's doing weed. This guy's running, the importation of the dirty lab fentanyl and meth. Oh, this guy's running my trafficking, and he's got the northwest of the U.S., and this guy's got the southwest of the U.S.
Very organized.
It's very organized. And all you got to do, and there's a lot of, task forces and cops, and I'm still talking at all these conferences to narcotic officers and LE and feds and everything else, and they're just like, hey, we really care about this. And now we're starting to see this cannabis thing, and these Chinese or these cartels, Mexican, wherever they're coming from, are now affecting us in Michigan, or they're affecting us in Pennsylvania, or they're affecting us in Maine. I mean, of all things, Maine.
Right.
Same type of thing that we're seeing in Siskiyou and Southern Cal. Now it was Maine because of the way they regulated. Oklahoma. And so officers are like, oh, hell no. We don't want this how do we get ahead of the game? And what I like to say is, hey, we made a lot of mistakes getting there.
So you didn't have to.
Yeah.
Just listen.
Exactly. Just, I'm here to help.
Right.
You're here to help.
Right.
And honestly, I think the best way we do it is right what we're doing here, brother. We're talking on a podcast that people can listen to. There are, films and documentaries, feature films, those things in the works on this subject matter, Sound of Freedom. Bring more of it. Bring more of it to tackle that. And because now it's suddenly marketable in Hollywood, now you're going to see more of these stories.
They're fighting it.
They are.
There's a big fight going on. There's like this spectrum of what I said before, like it's just weed, man. Like what?
Yeah,
you're minimizing.
So 80s.
You're minimizing.
That's what I hear.
It.
It's so
There's
80s.
so much before. If you just listen to anything that John just had to say there, then you understand it's not just weed, man. And on the other end, people will hear this as, dude, you're just being an alarmist. Like you're making this out to be a bigger deal than it is. You watch too many movies, too many shows, whatever else. So there's this gap, this huge gap in between. And then there's people that are paranoid, right?
Yeah.
Of all that, whether it's because of the alarming things that they're hearing or seeing, or, that they've been hit straight in the face with this thing at one point or another. There is somewhere in the middle. And I think, unfortunately for me, like the pessimist in me thinks it has to get worse before it's going to get better. But it doesn't. If you understand that, that sometimes that is what has to happen, and we're seeing that now. Right. You just mentioned that now. We're sort of at critical mass. We're getting to that point. It's probably a little bit more momentum is probably going to be picked up here before something bad, real bad,
right,
worse than is already happening, is going to happen for people to kind of stand up. And what happens there is it's going to take people to go, enough is enough. But what you mentioned there about being prepared and being aware and being educated is the most important thing they can do. And here's what's happening, because I truly believe that there are those, maybe at a government level or whatever, media level, there's a lot of different powers to be there.
Right.
They recognize that what we're saying is very true. And they don't know that they're benefiting on it at some level, whether that's selling news stories or, media or whatever else, or there's some involvement or some connection. And they don't want to face the music on that yet, because that would mean detrimental effects to them and whatever, whether it's their pocketbook, their reputation, their businesses, or whatever else. And for a long time there, I was like, yeah, that's a little bit of conspiracy theory. Also, these are private companies. When you start to get to the media thing, they can do whatever they want. If you believe in the First Amendment, right? You also have to accept that companies can do those types of things or say those types of things. I don't like it. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I do believe in the Constitution. I also believe as an American citizen, you have to understand, you have to take responsibility for what you're listening to, what you're taking in, and all these other things. But here's my coming back to the human trafficking piece and getting the information out. It took forever for your book to kind of hit the mainstream. For finally, you're in front of a congressional hearing, and they're going, well, wait a minute, like, why have I not heard about this? Which is a great question they should be asking themselves, not you.
Right.
You should be taking personal responsibility. What is happening with your constituents and how out of touch are you with what's going on in your district, in your congressional district, in your state, in your cities and whatever else? And is it that you're out of touch, or you are purposefully or willfully not addressing those situations? So that's one part of this.
Yeah.
And I think the only way to get people to understand, or get those people to understand, and other people to somehow fit their way in to go, now I want to be educated, is to continually tell the story. But understand that the storytellers are being stifled in their message. And you mentioned this through podcasting, and audiobooks and things like that. That's what people are trying to consume, because I think they think, this is my faith in humanity. Sometimes it's very much challenged, but I think they think it's a smarter conversation, and it's not being interrupted.
Spot on. I agree.
And people are looking for more than a 30-second soundbite, which is a problem.
Right.
So, you sort of brought up this thing, and I will give you my own personal experience, because for a long time, I'm very libertarian at heart.
Right.
Like, I just, tell me what the bill is at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And then pardon my language, but leave me the fuck alone. I just want to do my thing. Allow me to do my thing. I'm not hurting anybody. I'm literally just trying to provide a service to the community.
Exactly.
Provide some employment to some people.
Make the best choices with what information I have.
Leave the world a better place than I found it whenever possible. Those kind of things. That's at heart. That's where I am. But
I share that with you.
But I also have to face the responsibility of, if you're not proactively trying to get messages out or putting pressure on people to allow the message to get out or make the changes, then you also have to feel personal responsibility to that. And I do feel, quite frankly, and I have kind of wrestled with this in the last month, based on this incident that happened, but I felt a little guilt, like a little failure in a little bit of like, well, maybe I could have helped. I could have helped be a part of something that would have prevented certain things. I know that's not a healthy mindset to go into it with. It's more like, okay, well, maybe that's not true, but what can you do now? You kind of mentioned this. So we had our building neighbors, another building here. Yeah. We have two big buildings here. And in the back, we have a small parking lot. Yeah. And it's separated by like this 5.5, 6 foot cinder block wall. And so we have very little parking back there. It's basically, we share it with the neighbors here. And I parked our travel van back there, which is, I've been very public about it. People see me traveling around. So it's a way for me to conduct business.
It's beautiful, man. Yeah. Mobile podcast studio, adventure, taking in,
I'm an entrepreneur, right? I'm a business guy too. And I'm like, look, I love being outside. You said like the woods are my church. Yeah. I needed to get out more than, we talked about this on the last podcast with the lockdowns and whatever. I recognized it had been a long time since I'd really been dedicated to getting out. And so we were doing that, and we were camping and we were doing stuff, but I started to also recognize like how limited we are if, here in like living where we are in the Silicon Valley, in terms of, I have response. I can't just leave, right, and be gone for a week. I have to be back 2 hours from here, 3 hours from here. Still pretty heavily populated in a lot of areas and a lot of things. So I was like, look, where can I get a little bit more reach and do some business while I'm on the road, and look for some business ventures and build some relationships and things? The travel van came up. Yeah. So it was two things. It was business, but it was also my way of spending time with the family outside of the concrete jungle. So it's parked behind the business vehicle, right? So for those people that are already on the board with, well, you shouldn't have had it parked there. Stop it. Yeah. Right? Let's park back there.
We're telling the story.
I worked really hard for this thing, right? And both Cece and I worked really hard to have this, and it was a big part of our life and our lifestyle. So on the other side of that cinder block wall, not more than 6 feet from where the van is parked, the neighboring building is owned by a building owner who also has a couple of businesses in there. And let's just say he's not the most stand-up character in the world. He's been investigated multiple times by both the county and the city for violations of many, many things. There's a cash checking business and a liquor store there. Yeah. It attracts a certain element. There's some things going on there. It's been going on for a long time. Well, he has been allowing some people to live behind the building in 2 dilapidated RVs and about 5 of these little pop-up, like easy up tents. And there's a box van back there owned by the building owner full of junk. I know it was in there. We never knew it was in there until a fire happened. Well, it's getting cold. It's winter. It's Thanksgiving. It's the weekend after Thanksgiving. Sunday night, I get a call from all of a sudden my phone starts blowing up. I'm starting to get texts from neighbors. I've been a member of this community for a long time. Yeah. My daughter hits me. She's calling me and she goes, "Hey Dad, there's a fire behind the building. You have to come down here and move the van." At this point, I'd already gotten some information, so I was already on my way down. Well, essentially what had happened, it was getting cold. They're trying to stay warm back there. Nobody's going to know what happened because of the total devastation that happened with the fire that wound up There were 15 fire trucks here. It was multiple stations. I know that because I went to all the stations to talk to all the firefighters that happened to be on shift later that week to kind of to thank them for salvaging saving what they could. There was 7 battalion chiefs on station that night. One of them actually broke his arm and tore his biceps, so he's going to be out for months. And the reason I tell the story is, okay, it's just a fire. Well, these people were illegally living back there. The neighbor that was directly behind us is actually an attorney for the city, and he built an ADU for his mother-in-law who works in the back. Beautiful construction on this house that they put a lot of work into. It's only been done about a year and a half. Tons of damage done to his business. Well, to his home. But when this thing popped up, I'm telling the story so that people kind of understand where we are with this. So bear with me here. When all of a sudden these RVs started moving in, he's calling this. He has a direct line to code enforcement. Direct line, he's litigated cases for the city and goes, "Hey, dude, this is what's going on back here."
Yeah.
The guy goes, "Well, can you give me some pictures?" He goes, "I can send you all the pictures you want, but you got to come out here and put the, you got to stop this because this is going to be a problem." So they deaf ear him a little bit. Nothing really happens. Well, now there's animals back there too, and there's more people and there's traffic and things like that. Well, now it's getting cold. This was going on for 2 years. They came out and so, okay, we're going to come out there. Well, he goes to the building owner and says, "I'm going to be doing an inspection on your property in 48 hours. What do you think happens?
Here we go.
They just move their food and move their clothing out, right? And they show up 40 hours. Oh, nope, nobody's living here. And they walk away. So me and this guy are like, what in the, this, no, this is ridiculous, right?
Crazy.
You have to come back. Okay, we'll come back out there. Same thing, 48-hour notice, came back out there, take their food and their clothes out.
Yeah.
Oh, there's nobody living here. It's fine.
Just prep.
Exactly. It's like you just,
crazy.
You're complicit in what's about to happen next, which is this winter, it's gotten very cold. It got wet. This wasn't even the 10th fire that they'd had that got out of control. This was just the one that got way away from them. And it turned into a raging fire to what I just described.
No.
And it damaged a lot of property. And who's left holding the bag at the end? Me.
Yeah.
Right? The homeowners, right? I tell the story because I got real angry.
Sure.
Real angry. And I'd just been kind of the mindset of, I just want to be left alone here. And now things let's just say I was feeling it in my guts now and I was really pissed off. So I did some posting. People kind of saw that and got a feel for what that thing looked like. My van got roasted. I'm in insurance hell trying to get repairs.
And if I can interject just for a second, I saw that post and then I texted you. And what people don't realize is, a vehicle, a lot of us pride ourselves on the vehicle we have, of what it's capable of doing because of what it facilitates. It's not about having a really cool vehicle.
That's exactly it.
It's a vessel, man.
It's
like a starship, right? You're going to do adventure. And it broke my heart because I know you and your daughter, I see these pictures of you out in the southern desert,
right?
Out there going to Joshua Tree Ridgecrest, probably having the best times of bonding with your little girl.
100%.
Getting The Woods Are My Church on. And when something like that gets destroyed, you lose part of you, man.
The memories don't get destroyed.
Yeah, no, they don't. But now you're hindered. You don't have the van to use. And now you're, just trying to get back to what it is. And my heart goes out. But that's a hard run, man.
It sucks, right? Yeah. And people just look at it as just a van. It can be replaced. You're right. It can be replaced. But there were business opportunities lost. I had business booked and travel booked.
Well,
to do
your
that.
mobile podcast. I didn't even mention that.
Right.
How remote for.
I can get out. The podcast drives revenue for my business. That's one of the reasons we do it. I don't make money on the podcast.
Right.
I make money in the business when people it brings awareness to the business. That's the long story on that. Very frustrating. Nobody wants to be held accountable to that. Code enforcement's like, whatever. The city's like, yeah, that's really unfortunate. The city attorney's like, he's livid because this didn't need to happen. He almost lost his home. He's got kids and his mother-in-law back there. The whole 9 yards. This will go on forever, and while we're left to hold the bag. But I sent out an email to 4 people about 4 or 5 days later. And I said, I've been pretty silent down here. This is who I am. This is what to these people that I know. You know who I am. You know what I do. I'm irritated, and I think we need to stand up because our entire neighborhood is basically under siege right now.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not talking about the couple that was living back there.
Sure.
Right? I'm talking about the fact that we have been dealing with since COVID, particularly, and downtown's always been a thing. It's something you accept when you move into a major metropolitan area.
Sure.
You're going to deal with a certain amount of this. You're never going to completely be away from it. And you learn how to be prepared and manage through it and manage your expectations at the same time.
Yeah.
My expectation is that the codes and the laws are going to be that we've all decided on, we pay for, and I'm going to trust that the city and the municipality and the police department and the fire department and the code enforcement are going to do their job.
Right.
And they are not doing their job. And I'm not saying that to the law enforcement officer that literally walks up to see how we're doing on a daily basis. He pulls out of I know all these guys.
Yeah.
And I go back to what I was saying before. They're having a tough time out there dealing with all this stuff, but they're concerned and they want to help. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people that pull the strings, right? The people that sign the paychecks, right? Those are the people we're talking about. Well, I sent out this email for people. I want to rally the troops. Anybody that's interested in getting to the bottom of some very specific things, the crime, the blight, the homelessness, and the safety concerns that we have down here, meet up at the gym on Thursday night at 8:00.
Break it down.
I had 80 people in the gym. I don't even know who these people are.
Wow.
Sent out 4 emails.
Wow.
It spread like wildfire. It's spread as fast as the fire spread behind the building. And
little inspiration in your community there.
I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was shocked. And I don't know why I was shocked, except that what I found was with all the differences that folks have, with all the topics that we've talked about today, people are going to find themselves on all kinds of partisan lines, right? On different sides of the aisle and all these different issues. Yeah. At the end of the day, there's things that we can agree on, and that is public safety.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Homelessness, crime, drug addiction. Those are things that I think most people would love to solve if they can, but nobody's coming together to do that. And what happened was we had this huge group of people come together that created a lot of stir. And the next thing I know, the next day, the mayor was here, the chief of police was here, literally in the lobby of the building that you just walked into, right?
Yeah,
we had members with city council, right? There's currently a city council race. I have had one-on-one meetings with every candidate so far. We've been hosting meetings for people to meet and greet those people to understand. And what they're learning from this is from us, what the real issues are. Because what I've been surprised to find is that a lot of times, like when it just goes all the way back to sitting in front of the Congress and going, wait, how come I didn't know about this? I want to know about the stories. They're only just now happening of hearing about the stories that I've been dealing with in this city for over 10 years. I've had a business in this city for 15 years. And I have plenty of stories. And you know what it's been? It's been like an abusive freaking relationship. It's like, why people go, just move, bro.
Yeah.
I'm like, look,
no, I'm not getting out of it.
No.
I'm too committed. I'm too far down that road.
And I don't want to abandon my community.
No, you don't.
And I don't want to abandon my people or my family. And again, there's principles and values that I'm attached to, but I expect some behavior change. I expect some things to be changed. And so I say all of that to say, bringing this back to kind of the things that you're doing, like if you're not listening and you're not getting involved, then don't expect anything to change.
Correct.
You can expect it's going to get a lot worse. And then from the preparedness perspective, like, you know what happened? I'm sure it was the same for you and your family, John. When all this business came up with what's happening, the horrors that are happening in Gaza between Palestinians and the Jews there and all this stuff. And I've never brought that up publicly, but I'm going to do it now. What I watched was people panic. We saw all these protestings and things happening in the streets and the violence that was starting to kind of pop up and who it was being, the fingers were being pointed at. I had this conversation with my buddy the other day, David Acosta Jr., who's down in Texas now.
Yeah.
But you know what I did to prepare for that and all that? Absolutely nothing. Because I already am prepared for those types of things.
You're ready.
Because I stay in front of this stuff. I try to be absolutely nothing. But what if the store shut down? What if they shut down, man? I'm good.
I'm good.
Right? What if violence comes to your front door? I'm good, man. What if, there's a medical issue? Bro, I'm good. What if they shut off the water? I'm good.
Yeah.
Like versus all this reaction stuff that ends up happening. And so what I saw was a lot of reaction in my my storefront when people came in that night. And I was like, look, this stuff's been going on for a long time. I'm just standing up and going, do you want to come together on this and fix it? So that goes back to just the awareness, the education, and the keep telling the story, because it's going to get stifled. People don't want to hear it. And a lot of times people just aren't in a position that they don't know where to go to hear it.
Well, it's spot on, man. And first of all, I hope this whole thing with the van gets resolved.
Me too.
And you get a new van, because it's such a vessel for your...
It's the process.
It's a process, but I'm pulling for you on that. And, I think at the end of the day, people are basically good.
Yep.
They really are.
I believe that.
I do believe that. I mean, you have your evil, you have that percentage. And
that is a true statement too. Both can be true.
And, I feel on the cartel front, I fought the darkest version of evil operationally, and I want to speak against it now. And thanks for being that supportive and being part of that thin green line solution. But people are basically good. And I always say that if you find an issue that affects everybody and they can just understand it without being overwhelmed and not panicking. When you said panic, as soon as we went into shutdown, as soon as we saw the Gaza, Israel, all that, and ironically, this is crazy, the day I testified in Congress that morning, all those protesters flooded the Capitol.
Right. And
I get this call from my hotel like, can you be down here 2 hours early? Because it's really getting Western here at the Capitol. And it's getting flooded. You're going to have to come in this certain way. I'm like, oh, great. It literally just happened within a couple of days.
Wow, you were right in the middle of it.
Well, and they were saying it's either going to get canceled and we're going to try to have you back in a couple of weeks. Wow. And I went, that's a big deal to come back to DC. And, but is this going to go? It ended up going a couple hours late, but I saw people flooding on both sides of that fence. There were 300 arrests that day. And then they flooded the Natural Resources building actually while we were in the hearing, and the aides were getting video of people coming across to the Natural Resources building. And I went, okay, how Western is this going to get?
Right.
But what I saw on both sides was a level of stubbornness, panic, intolerance. And I cannot believe, and this was announced just last night, it's all over the news, that we haven't seen a level of overt anti-Semitism worldwide till now, even through the Nazi horrific Holocaust. It's worse than that, right? And that breaks my heart.
Same.
Because at the end of the day, people are good. Race, religion, creed, who cares? Come together. We want to be human beings on this planet and we want to thrive with our families, hate's not going to help us with that. Right. And I think we saw this through the whole COVID lockdown thing, and we see this polarization on the left and the right now. I just listened to Taylor Sheridan on Joe Rogan's podcast, and Taylor Sheridan's one of my favorite director producers. He's so spot on with his lens of honesty, whether it's Yellowstone, Wind
Keeps
River.
Very short and to the point.
Oh yeah. And he's getting a bunch of hate, but that's what happens when you speak the truth, man. We're going to have haters.
This is my point. Yeah.
But they're diving in, ironically, to what you and I are diving in right now. And when you get so full of panic and hatred and pessimism, you're not going to listen to anybody. And if you're on the polar opposites of that left or right political spectrum, wherever you sit, you're not even going to be able to sit next to somebody and have a conversation. And I can sit here as a brother and we can agree to disagree on anything and still be brothers, still respect each other, still admire and love each other as Americans, doing the best we can for our friends and family and for our community, right?
Absolutely.
But you have to break down those barriers. And I've always said, I get back to the woods of my church. I think nature, and why I'm so compelled by protecting wildlife, waterways, and wild lands, nature is a healer. It wasn't COVID when people had to get out of depression and lockdowns just by walking a paved trail at Los Gatos Park, whatever.
Right.
And, fishing and hunting license sales and people entering online hunter education classes went up 30, 40% the year of lockdowns. Guns were purchased. People were trying to get training because to what you just said, I'm not going to panic. I might have to hunt to, supply my own family with food. I might need to learn to purify water.
At least they're thinking about it.
Yeah. At least they're thinking about it. And if we all take a breath, and I liken it this way, this is when I think you get people with their guard down, is sit with them, side by side, with a fishing rod in your hand, or looking at a river, or sit in a tree stand if you're a hunter, or be in nature, say the Kootenai River where I'm at in Montana, or any Henry Coe Park, any of the beauty we have right here in Ground Zero, and just breathe. and have a conversation totally out of politics, and you'll find that we're really not that different.
No, we're not.
I'll talk about my band right now. So here I am, a singer with a rock band of 4 guys, and they're all from Montana originally. Obviously, my family's there. I'm there now, and I have one very left, one very right. I'm kind of middle of the road, I would say, and I'd probably say our lead guitarist is middle of the road. And these are approximations, and I will see political conversations get started as we're doing band rehearsal and we're getting ready to gig, and they'll get pretty heated. And I'm like, whoa. And of course, I'm pretty outspoken, I mean, I don't go political, but this is going to lean a political way with a message if we're being honest, right, Scott? If we're being
honest, man. Yeah.
And I get, John, why aren't you weighing in on this? Why aren't you weighing in on this? Why aren't you weighing in on this? I go, why?
Yeah.
Guys, neither of you are wrong. Because I may have knowledge, I may have research, I may have testified or spoken to a particular issue that, given the facts, I know will work or won't work for the sake of public safety and environment, whether it's cannabis law, border control laws, sustainable energy sources in America versus farming it out to other countries, whatever the case may be. But that's my lens. That's what I've researched. You have a lens, whether it's heavily researched or not, that is yours, and your opinion matters. So it's not for me to dominate that conversation and tell you you're wrong. It's not for you to fight me on that, but you got to extend that same courtesy. And if we can agree to disagree, we will. And what I've found, and we're going on 5, I've been in the band for 5 years. The band's been together for 10.
Wow.
And the brotherhood has come closer because what I do in that thing is I don't engage in the political conversations, but I empathize and I hear every side. And then I make fun when things get a little heated. And I found that everybody's getting a little closer.
It's a great level of understanding.
It's beautiful, man. My far left, member of the band is hit me. Dude, did you see this stuff? Can you believe this law? What's really going on? This is crazy.
Yeah.
I go, I know. But ironically, we voted that guy in.
Yeah.
Right? So there you go. And then my hardcore conservative, same thing. And we're really not that different, but we got to break down those barriers. And we got to be in an environment that's very facilitating of that. It encourages it. And I think nature does that great. And it can be in a music studio for musicians. It can be, you and I here in a podcast studio. But man, nature is a healer. Mother Nature she's brutal, but she's raw and honest. And she gives you a lot of beauty and you learn a lot of respect.
Because she'll smack you right in the face.
Oh, yeah, she'll kick your ass.
You don't respect or have a solid relationship with her.
She'll knock you right down on your butt, for sure.
I think that what you're saying there is what I was trying to get across is that I've been very, very surprised at watching the people come together on the real issues, right? Because at the end of the day, we really do want to see the same things for humans, right? Again, we may be coming at it from different angles and we all have our different lenses. And it's been a real challenge for me to just kind of step back and do more listening and kind of take it all in. But what I've also discovered is how the lens gets formed, right? And honestly also, that it's, when you look at that lens, it's kind of like a dirty windshield sometimes.
It can be pretty dirty.
It can be pretty dirty, and they just need it cleared off a little bit. And if you're driving at 100 miles an hour, right, and you're just trying to keep your eye on the road, like you're not necessarily thinking about turning on the windshield wipers and the windshield wiper washer fluid. And even if you did, probably not going to get a really clean windshield because you're going too damn fast.
Yeah.
Like, slow down a second.
A little streaky.
Yeah, slow down a second. And also understand that there are people that are driving, you mentioned driving the bus or not driving the bus, that are pushing things in at a rate that are keeping people on their heels rather than them getting a firm foundation underneath them with their feet and looking at fitness, just a base, right? To be able to perform from or think from or solve a problem from. One of those things with like the human trafficking thing. As all the topics we cover on this show, right? And some of them are very polarizing, right? I try not to be controversial, but they're very polarizing when we start to look at things like firearms and whatnot, which is really a no-no on a lot of these major social platforms. I've never had a warning, never had a tick, never had anything on anything. One time on
I got to tell you about my tick.
I'm just looking at Eli right now. I think the one we got from TikTok was because of the trailer video we posted of John. And it was that picture, dude. It was that because you had your kit on with your badge and whatever else. And they said, boom, warning. That's the only one I ever got, with the exception of...
I caused a warning for you.
Yeah,
dude,
man.
I'm so sorry.
It's all your fault, man.
No, it's not. Oh, man.
Eli and I both chuckled about it. That was the one. And by the way, it's TikTok. I don't care.
Yeah.
But my point of this is I did we're talking about the human trafficking thing. And again, how people get information and how they're not getting information. The only other warning, and it was a soft one, was from YouTube on an episode I did with a law enforcement officer who specifically deals with, here in the Bay Area, specifically deals with human trafficking. And they're like, hey, guy, I just want to let you know, like, advertisers are not going to advertise on this particular episode because of, this violates our policies. I'm like, what? Telling the truth about what's happening. And by the way, so that was inspired by the movie that we were talking about earlier. And and when I walked out of that movie, I was like, this goes back to the lens. Yeah. You are going to probably have way more, we all have our own perspective and our own lens when we're looking at that. But I knew about that story, and I know about a lot of detail, and I try and look at things from a lot of different angles and a lot of different levels to understand what the reality of it is. And when I walked out of that movie, this is the point I'm trying to make, I recognized there was a lot in there that they couldn't show to show the reality. Exactly. And I don't know about you, but I was almost immediately, I was a little disappointed. Like, they missed so many things. But then I also had to step back and realize, or they didn't portray, but I also had to step back and realize, like, had they, I would have never seen the movie. Because it would have been released. Right. And so when I walked out of there, and so what that allowed was for people to humans love to finish the story. Right. To fill in the gaps. Sure. And if they don't have any perspective of what should fill in the gaps, things can get wildly kind of off base. Yeah. And so when I walked out of there, I was like, hey, there's a lot left on the table there in my mind. But also it took me some time to process, to understand some things and look at it and talk to it, have a lot of conversations like I'm having with you now to kind of realize it more. And I'm like, I think people that don't understand will walk out of that and go, I'm so far removed from that. That only happens in South and Central America. And it's just so rare. Like, come on, okay, it's a good story. And I understand there's some horrible things, but it's really not that big a deal here in the United States. I wanted to understand what it's like literally in my backyard. Like, what does human trafficking look like here as compared to the story that was portrayed there? And that was, by the way, nothing controversial. It's all, anything discussed was discussed specifically about like cases that were publicized in the media, closed and whatever. This guy's on the speaking circuit now with law enforcement across the nation, to get the word out there. And the point of that is that's the thing I got the warning on. That message, this message, the hidden war message, right? This is what people don't want you to know as the public. You have to be more than just open to the conversation. That's what you were just talking about. Right. You have to be willing to have the conversations with people that see things maybe much differently than you. They may have some knowledge and a perspective that's much different than yours to understand this very thing. That's my PSA for the day. Sorry, John. No, it's spot on. And, it triggered, I got my first social media warning tick just a couple months ago. Is that right? And it was from IG, and it just popped up out of the blue, and it said, just so you know, your reels, any of your posts will not go to the public feed. Only your followers can view your content. You got one of those, did you? Because of these standards. And they actually showed 5 posts that they said, edit and correct these, and we'll be good to go. And it was, I write for Gun Digest, obviously, Recoil Magazine, their part of publishing group. And they had wrote an article about my EDC that I have today. It's a Glock 48 MOS, how it's outfitted. I commented on that. Yeah, you commented on it. It was great. I appreciate it. EDC, yep. Yeah, and so I have a picture of me in Montana in the snow up in God's country, doing my hunt, and I'm reading the magazine and showing some pictures from within it. And then SIG's done some stuff, and I have a Rattler, for it's the weapon up there for indoor, outdoor. Yep. SIG suppressor, they provided it. There I am picking it up from my tax stamp. Machine Guns Montana. Thank you, Brent. Perfect. Federally legal. Federally legal. Talking about I'm going to test it for SIG. This is a great, hunting weapon. It's a great recreational weapon. It is a personal defense weapon. Heaven forbid you have to use it for that. Right away, that needs to go because there I am, standing with a firearm because it's a gun. Right. And evil. It was so funny. Everyone's like, well, your brand's important and your reach is growing and this and that. Are you going to change anything? And I said, no. Right. Why the heck would I change anything? I use firearms for legitimate, legal, ethical reasons to protect, not destroy, unless I have to destroy in the process of protecting, right? And to feed my family and to teach others to prepare
to protect themselves and their families if the grid goes down and if 911 isn't going to get you a response, which we know, Scott, you hit it on the head just a while ago. That's done.
It's done.
Post-COVID, COVID was that shot across the bow.
Nobody's coming,
where nobody's coming, be self-sustainable, eliminate the panic and the preparedness. So it's ironic that you hit that up, and I was responsible for your Nick. And I'm sorry, brother.
It's all good, man.
But I'm glad we stayed on it.
It's so interesting to think about it. Again, people don't want to believe that those are truths, right? And they want to be angry. And that was the thing that I was listening to you talking about, your friends in the band there, and that it's really important. Like if you're just an angry guy, and I think there's a lot of that. I think there's a lot of that. And I think there's a time and a place for that. Like I really do. But if it's constantly pitchforks and torches, right? You're trying to burn down the other side. Like just understand that your message is probably not going to reach for all kinds of reasons.
Sure.
The people that you're trying maybe to reach, understand that more. And you just put up a really good point there, is like, you have to trust and believe that your fans, your followers, right? The people that engage with your social media account that do see it, they're going to push it out to other people.
Sure.
Right? And you're not dependent on IG to do that for you. You have too many irons in the fire, too many relationships built, too much integrity and respect that's been built over time to have somebody like IG impact that.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's another thing people just need to get over, to understand like the realities of that. Like, okay, look, if you stacked everything in terms of getting your message out there in IG, well, you've done that to yourself, and that's a big problem. You're going to find out how fast you're not in control of your brand or yourself or whatever else. Your message.
Yeah, and exactly.
So you've been able to kind of diversify and do things. That's very smart. That's what a business professional would do, and a person that is trying to convey a message that they truly want to get out, not just for their own. For their own benefit, but for somebody else. Like, I have things to get out there and understand how these things work for me, and how they work for other people. And I think that's a message that gets lost a lot of times. And we talk about social media a lot on the podcast. It's a double-edged sword, man.
It is. It's something we need, but it's the least personal. And obviously, you and I are about a lot more than social media. But the one thing I will say for social media, and it's funny.
Put us together.
It put us together. It really did. Yeah. And none of this would have happened. Right. And we wouldn't have got, book one, War in the Woods, back when it was operational in 2010. Yeah. I mean, it did fine because I was pushing it like the little engine that could, as we like to say, but nobody knew. And we were doing documentary TV. We were doing Patriot Profiles documentaries. We were doing Wild Justice, the Game Warden reality show,
that was awesome. Yeah.
Even showing some of this stuff, as you remember, and people are still like, I have no idea. How is this going on? Blah, blah,
decades. Blah. This has been going on for decades.
But I got to bring up something that I thought was really, really cool. You've been doing a lot of shooting, preparing, and I'm a long range guy.
Yeah,
ran a sniper unit, do the hunting thing, like long range, like the ethics of stalking close when you're hunting or just shooting or whatever. And you had a pew day where you're shooting way out,
right?
Because I saw that Elite 5700, Kestrel.
Yeah.
Oh, and I didn't know Scott's using that device, so I use that too, obviously in my kit.
Yeah. I'm dumb, so that's a lifesaver for me.
It's a lifesaver when I have 5 guns and I got different profiles and different ammo, so I'm playing with it too. There, But I just want to hear from you what your evolution has been and how much you've enjoyed it and where you've been going from preparedness, obviously, but just the stress relief and, capturing another challenging and getting proficient in another challenging task for guys like you and me is just a reward. And it's a calming effect, to lack of a better word. I think shooting is relaxing when it's done, especially in the woods. But
I think thank you for asking the question. I don't often get asked that question, or any questions for that matter, because I'm usually sitting on the other side of the table here. But it's been hugely beneficial for me because, first, like a lot of things, I think fitness, like your fitness and health journey, that's what it is. It's a journey, and you're constantly finding out what works for you now based on what you knew from the past, and that there's new technology, there's new things to discover, there's constantly things coming out. And so when I started my journey just sort of into more firearms training, because I had kind of grown up around it, but it was just something we did on occasion. Firearm safety, efficiency. That was something that was instilled into me when I was very little. When I was 10 years old, my dad gave me my first rifle, and I'd been shooting before that, but that was the time, and it followed me through. But then things that happened, during the lockdowns are what really encouraged me, or really kind of forced me into, I need to be better and understand more. And the long range stuff, the distance stuff didn't come up until really
pretty recent, right?
Literally last year. I got invited on a hunt, and I hadn't been shooting in so long with and done any kind of distance shooting, because part of shooting sort of where we live is that I'm very limited, and the public is very limited. Let's just put it that way. The public is very limited on access to ranges to go shoot. So unless you know somebody with private property where you can get out there, which is very hard here. Everything is it's all eaten up, right? So you're really limited to maybe 100 to 200 yards at max. Yeah. So, well, for some people that might seem like a really long way. The reality of things is that's still CQB, to a lot of, when you talk to people that have sort of been in that field, you included, 200 yards is pretty close. Right. If you're facing an adversary, particularly if it's a worthy adversary. So I got introduced to it just in there's several characters out there that have really pick this up as maybe more of their business model, because they're recognizing people really want to stretch out their rifles.
Absolutely.
Their carbines that they bought, 2 to 3 years ago. And they're like, hey, there's a lot more capability in this platform. Right. I want to try to do some stuff. And then along the way, it just kind of got really popular. And I was kind of on the front end of that popularity piece. And just I want to discover this. The question you asked is how has it evolved? Well, it started with me, just with a basic red dot optic, and being able to, hey, my vision isn't awesome, so how far can I get this out to? Then to a magnifier, right? And then to LPVOs, and then we're talking to first and second focal plane type stuff. And what I realized from it was how much thinking goes into it.
There's a lot.
Yeah, and I don't have to go out to the range with 500 rounds, or 1,000 rounds for a range day. If I go out with a couple of hundred rounds, man, I can get a lot of work done. But it puts me in nature. It puts me out there.
That's the key. That's a key, huh?
And it generally puts me around other people, a lot of dudes, right? There's been a few females that have been out there too that I've learned a ton from. But it puts me out there with people that are generally like-minded in a lot of ways, but also come from very different perspectives and see things through different lenses. Yeah. But you're in this environment where everybody's kind of sharing, this challenge of reaching out to 500, 800, 1,000, 1,500 yards. And you're learning how to solve a problem. And that learning of how to solve a problem really is the same as solving any other problem when you think about it. You have to observe. What am I looking at here? You have to make some type of an estimation and some guesses. Yeah. You have to go back to your experience. Right. Then you have to read okay, so what are the other things I may not really understand here? Wind, elevation, temperature, all that stuff. I was like, man, this is way different than going out to the pistol range. Right. And just, and working on, drills out there or whatever else. And from a practical perspective, when it comes to hunting or maybe being self-sustainable, there was an element to that I was really starting to wrap my head around. And it can be a money suck. I'll tell you that, man. Yeah. There's so much out there, but it's put me in front of.
They cost.
They cost a lot of money, but my point of that is put me in front of so many cool people, right? Where you have to. It's quiet, right? There's really a little distraction. I'm hiking a lot of times, I'm out there in the woods, I'm getting sweaty, right? My heart rate's getting up. I'm being challenged to manage those things while shooting a lot of times. We're in different terrains and different parts. I'm seeing parts of the country, parts of California I've never seen before because to get the access that we're talking about, I've had to travel a little bit, which has been a lot of fun. But what I found is there's a circle of people within that genre that are just much different. And I feel like that's my tribe. And if I get invites to go places, I do everything I possibly can to make that happen. Even if it's less frequently than I would like it to be, I will make the commitment to go do it, because it is, when I come back, it's
you're refreshed.
Oh, it's
you're reset, right?
I'm down regulated. My brain feels better. I'm kind of brought back to earth. I feel good. look, the smell of gunpowder is always cool. Like I always like that when I'm there, but it's the down regulation that I get from it. And also like the connections that I make. I've made some of the best friends literally I've had in my life in the last couple of years through that, where I can text them, call them, ask them questions, talk about stuff way outside of shooting, right? And distance shooting, but like nerd out on that stuff. It's been a really cool, interesting journey.
It's cool to see it, man. And having, been in that world for the last 20 years, I'm like, hey man, Scott's really getting into that little niche. And people in the long range community, sometimes we get misperceived as all you want to do is prove that you can be in the 1,000-yard club to harvest an animal. What about stalking and getting close and making it sporting and making it a fair chase, fair hunt? And I get asked this all the time because when we started on the sniper journey and going to sniper schools before we had our own sniper team, 1,000 yards was like light speed. That was stratosphere. That was like you're shooting onto it.
Oh yeah, the internet would tell you couldn't do it.
You couldn't do it. Right?
308 can't get out to that.
And then when Delta Team developed for MET, we had the POF platform, very similar to a patrol rifle. Right. We had a Mark IV Leopold, 4.5 to 14. And basically we expected to shoot those guns no further than 600 yards, ever. Because that was our mission. We were going to be fairly close, watching residences, grow houses, going into, remote grow sites, and being able to integrate in with our entry team to go do a raid and not have this massive sniper platform that isn't going to work in the brush because we're a limited team. But now the technology, like you said, is crazy.
It's nuts.
And I got Altera Arms, who are a fantastic high-end rifle company out of the Boise area, Idaho. And right when I came out of retirement, myself and a SEAL Team 6 veteran, Terry Hewen, and a buddy, there was a sniper operational on his unit as well for years. Great guy. We both got 300 PRCs from Altera.
Oh, nice.
And the 300 PRC had just dropped from Hornady like earlier that year.
Okay.
And worked with Altera. And I went, what is this caliber? And I'm reading on it, replacing the 300 Win Mag. It's that medium to long range, still shoulder fired. Fantastic platform. Fantastic caliber. I'm running a 6.5 and a 6.5 Creedmoor and a 33 nozzler from Altera as well for other applications. But you've seen it in my post. Old Faithful is now the 300 PRC.
Gotcha.
It's getting that log of shots on living creatures for animals or for target shooting, exceeding like the 270 I grew up on that has been the bread and butter gun for, putting food on the table.
For centuries here, for over a century.
But the challenge, man, and this, is geeking out on the equipment, but really doing it with proficiency from, cardiovascular capabilities, making sure you're there, and strength, running around and hiking. And the hunts I go on with this 300 PRC, I can shoot to 1,000 and beyond. And I've harvested animals very far with it. 965 yards is the furthest I've shot a hog. And I've had some witnesses see that, but I did it under perfect wind, an animal that's doing land damage, right? And it worked. Did I like doing that shot? I didn't necessarily like doing that shot.
It's a long way. Some people would say, is that really the right thing to do?
Is that really the right thing to do? But the only reason I did it, Scott, is I had 3 canyons removed, and I'm shooting across 3 canyons to do this on a cattleman, a good friend from a cattleman family, the last of the iconic here in Silicon Valley, that are having a ton of habitat damage.
Yeah.
As well as the agencies from these hogs, and basically out there helping with that problem. And so I decided to take that shot and got that shot. But ironically now, when I got this big gun that can shoot to 15, no problem, I will run my tail end off if I'm healthy to close the gap closer. To shoot at 30 yards, and it's one of those things where the long rangers get misunderstood by the bow hunters, and the bow hunters, get misunderstood by the muzzle loaders. And it's like, and I've had this talk with other guys like you, and other podcasters that really get it. Guys, we're all conservationists. We're all promoting the Second Amendment in a healthy way. We have so much haters. We don't need to be fighting within.
Silly.
If you can make an ethical shot at 1,000 yards and you can't get closer, or you have a disability, you're not capable of hiking, and you can do it ethically with training, not just the gizmos will do it. And I know you've seen this on the long range side. I've had so many guys buy the $10,000 buy once, cry once rifle from our company or Gunworks or whatever, and they go shoot 20 to 40 rounds through it. It's zeroed at the factory. They've got their custom hand loads developed from the factory. Their dope turret is ready to go. They're given a Kestrel. They're given a laser rangefinder, whatever. And boom, they go and shoot. They hit a couple of times. And I've seen so many without the training and the prep following up on that big expensive kit, miss, injure, hit nothing. And that's what gives us long rangers a bad name.
Yep.
And I said it in our pilot film on the Thin Green Line on the Mexican border, hunting those Aoudad rams that's up on my YouTube channel. I'm talking with my partner, now retired Captain Mark Imsdahl, one of my lead snipers on the Met team, one of my best friends. And we shot our Aoudad side by side at 715 yards, right? And that's pretty long. That's a long range poke, regardless of what you're shooting. And we couldn't get closer. And we described those ethics. And I said, everybody just back off on the long rangers. It's another really healthy thing to do. And I really consider us in that world to put in the time and the money and the mental preparation and the practice like you're doing. I mean, I think that's about as responsible as you can get as a firearm user for any reason. But then the capabilities that, heaven forbid, you do have to protect your family, or you do have to, the grid goes down and now you're hunting an animal a week to survive. Yep. And that's the only shot you have. That's a life or death thing.
Yeah, so, it's so funny you bring that up, like just with regard to like the backing off and the ego stuff and the like. If you believed everything the internet said, then you would never be able to shoot your 14.5-inch, AR platform out past 500 yards. Like it's silly. Like it is silly. And I found out that right away, that's kind of how I got into like doing the podcast bit with regard to like the preparedness side of things, is because I'm like, why is everybody so angry with one another? Like, I think we're all trying to do the same stuff here. Like, this is really weird. Yeah. So I got out there and I started talking to people to try to learn and understand it. And so you're bringing in the tech piece and the $10,000 buy once, cry once type of thing. At the end of the day, and you mentioned like they go out, they shoot 30 or 40 rounds, and then they want to bag on the guy who shoots a ram at 700 and whatever yards, right? They haven't even shot their guns yet.
Right.
Like my philosophy is like, I don't care what you got. There's a capability in all of it. You may not even understand what that is because you don't shoot enough. Go shoot your guns. Yeah. Right. And then practice. Once you do that and you understand and you've really stretched and you understand what the limitations of yourself are, which the gun's going to do what the gun's going to do.
Right.
Right. All the money that you throw into it, sure, you can get, it's like fitness, right? Like, you can throw a bunch of extra stuff at supplements and gear and whatever else at the end of the day. Like even like people, when I say gear, I mean that, literally in the sense of equipment, but I also mean that with the guys that are using performance enhancing drugs or whatever. Like it only gives you a very small percentage of anything. And I'm not even going to call it an edge. I'm just going to say maybe performance at some level on top of what the fundamentals ultimately are at the end of the day. And you got to go shoot your guns. And so that's one of the things I got from this community is one, get yourself around people that can shoot, go practice, stay out of the comment sections and the chat rooms about what can and can't be done. Because going back to your perspective of lens, right? Like I've seen the best part about it is when I go out to these places and people are like there for their first times, right? And they have their own, they're already set limitations. They already believe in their head what they can or they can't do with it, or what the gun's capable or not capable of.
Sure.
And within a couple hours, they're like reaching out to 1,000 yards when they thought their limitation was going to be 5, right? Whatever. Like, and they're watching everybody else on the line do the same thing, right? Yeah. And to understand that at the end of the day, it's a math problem, right? And the more you practice that math, right, and understand all the nuance that goes into things, and you can't learn that. By the way, you cannot learn this by going to one weekend course, and then watching some YouTube videos and going out to the range once or twice for your 30 or 40 rounds.
You gotta push it.
I think this is what you're putting into this, is that and you're making decisions like this, whether it's getting involved in the conversation, or taking the shot. It's based on a confidence and a knowledge that I know what I'm capable of. I know what my platform's capable of. I'm making a conscious decision. While in distance shooting, there's always a little bit of guessing. Has to be. There has to be.
That math gets funky with wind, and
that's part of it.
As you reach out,
it comes from based on experience, and there's just like this industry but the niche within the industry, this long range stuff that's coming up. I think there's two things that it's up against right now. One is some old timers that don't want to get involved in the new tech and the things that are happening, the new calibers, or the new ammo, whatever.
Sure,
that's limiting. then you also have like these new adopters or people that are just going out, well, I have $10,000. I'm going to buy my capability.
Yeah.
So they go out and they buy the $10,000 gun, think they know it all in 30 or 40 rounds. And then they want to put all the stuff, everything they know, start a YouTube channel, whatever else. I'm an expert now. Right. And then you have the guys that have been doing this a while, like yourself, that are just looking at it from the end going, these guys are going to have to learn somehow. I really don't want to get involved in this conversation. But if somebody wants to sit down and have that conversation with me, I might be able to have that thing. So
down to share.
I appreciate you asking me the question. It's definitely something I'm passionate about. And I already have a couple of trips calendared this year.
Nice.
I know we were talking about this before we got started. I'll be at SHOT Show. Yeah. It's a little over a week away from when we're recording this. I have a couple of people lined up on that show. One of them is Heavy. He's from his name's Scott Peterson. He's from the Army Marksmanship Unit.
I know that name. Yeah.
You have to.
I know that name.
Veracity Solutions on Instagram.
Okay.
I'm going to give a shout out to Scott right now.
Right on.
Because he's a guy that's worked a job where he's had to stay rather kind of under the radar. The dude's been connected with all the best people in my mind. He's a wizard with this stuff, and he has a lot to share. I'm going to have him on the show because I think those are the people that need to have the platform to talk rather than those other guys that we were just talking about. So
he comes from a great perspective, and you got to get to.
I'm interested, but I'm interested to get into that a little bit more. But one of the things I'm also really interested in, we talked about all the things you kind of been up to. We talked about the music, we talked about the book, we talked about Congress, we talked about the messages, we talked about, you alluded to some cinema, or maybe, can we talk about this? Because I asked you about this last time and you said, not yet.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit more about that, and I'll get to that in a minute. But on the book front, we're about a year into the second edition.
Yep.
As you know, you got one of the very first copies. And ironically, what has really blown up on the sales is Audible. And the one book that isn't updated, and it's about to be updated, is the reread Audible of this version. So all these Audible sales have been the first edition, which is all good content, obviously the original story, but all the updated stuff that's happened in the last 3.5 years, plus the old missions, plus the forward by Jack Carr, my revised introduction. I reread for that middle of last year, here in a Silicon Valley studio to connect with Trammell Starks, our studio, basically producer, to revamp this. And that's going to drop any day. That's literally going to come up.
I heard I listened to my first experience was listening. My second experience was reading that book.
Awesome.
Yeah, the second edition, yes.
Awesome. But a lot of people would like to see the new, the second edition on Audible, so that's going to drop. On the cinema side, yes, I am an option for a feature film on Hidden War. That had just developed as we were talking last year and kind of get into fruition. Going with a great production team. And then we had almost a year-long writer's strike in the Guild and an actor's strike. That just lifted about a month and a half ago. And now we're off to the races right now.
Picking it back up
to get that script draft done and revised. Yep. So I'll have more information on that as we continue. But
cool. It's just another conversation we get to have.
And the other thing that's cool about that, Scott, is the lens right now in Hollywood of all these, what I would consider patriotic, masculine in a positive way, not toxic masculinity, conservation, hunting tones, community, that's coming back. Maverick,
it's interesting.
Top Gun,
right?
Kind of saved cinema that way. Like everyone's,
did a great job on that movie.
Did a great job. Yeah. And then you got the Yellowstone franchise. We talked about Sheridan before. Yep. I love what he's putting out on every level. I love the honesty he is. You see it in Yellowstone, even though there's a lot of drama going on. Wind River, that movie. If you haven't seen it, I think is one of his best because it takes a federal trapper who's sort of a game warden, but works for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So it kind of morphs. It's sort of a game warden. And Jeremy Renner plays that lead.
Okay.
And it's obvious.
Oh, yeah.
You probably know that movie.
Yep, I got it.
That's kind of one of my favorite movies from Sheridan because of...
I didn't realize he did that.
Oh, man. It was crazy. Yeah. And with the story with, Native American women disappearing, being underrepresented.
It's all coming back to me. It's very vivid now. Yes.
Huge story.
Great movie.
Yeah. But we don't have enough game warden stories, especially on this issue. We don't have it at all.
Yeah, they touch on it in the Yellowstone series.
They do.
They touch on it quite a bit. It's interesting, yes.
Yeah.
but no,
they do.
I don't know of one. Is there one?
No.
Is there There isn't one.
No, there's nothing like this yet. And when writers and producers that we bring into the realm see this for the first time, they go, holy crap.
Yeah, we're not redoing something which is very popular in cinema right now, just redoing movies.
And this isn't fiction. This is a real story that's really happening. And, obviously in a scripted film, there's going to be some time-lapse differences. Sure. There's going to probably be some, nonfiction pieces in it.
They have to make it a movie, yeah.
But everybody's wired right on the team. So definitely I'll have more on that and excited. Appreciate your support. And we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it here first.
That's the first thing when I told Cece that you were coming back in. She's like, dude, we got to find out about the movie. Find out what's going on with the movie. I was like, all right, I'll ask the question. So that one was for her.
Yeah. And then we got the documentary that was on a big hold as well. And that's back into production with added members to that team. So 2024 has just been the year it's had to happen. 2023 with the shutdowns on the production level in the Hollywood
trickled
level
over,
stopped us all. It stopped my buddy Jack Carr and the Ben Edwards prequel, The Terminal List. Great. They went on hiatus, but they're back on. Oh yeah, good stuff. And Pratt did another job of, American patriotism without being embellished and being honest to the tone. And I thought they did a great job. And we need more of that. And right now, Americans want that. The world wants that. So it's marketable.
It's totally.
So, you know what I mean?
I just telling we were sitting around the dinner table the other night and my daughter was asking, it's family Sunday dinner. The oldest was asking me, what are we watching on Netflix? I go, I'm not watching anything on Netflix. I don't really have time to watch much Netflix. What series she was telling us about stuff.
Yeah.
She goes, I'm a little bored because I'm about to finish this series. She reads a lot too. And I go, do you know about The Terminal List? She's like, the what? I go, I figured as much. The Terminal List. I go, it was a record-breaking show on Netflix. It was the most watched show when it came out.
It was.
After that, a few other things have trumped it, I think. But it was interesting. She even researched it.
Yeah.
And it didn't pop up on the list.
No.
And I was like, what?
No.
I mean, why wouldn't that pop up like on a Google, even a Google search? It actually stops right before there. I think it was like the Squid Game or something, which I never watched. I heard about it. Is the first one that pops up as like the most popular during like a certain time. It doesn't even pop up. But we know, going back to what you just said, Americans wanted to watch that because seems a lot of people watched it.
Well, what happened, and Jack talked about this on Tucker Carlson right after Terminal List dropped, and I was in dialogue with Jack on this, or we had just done his podcast, something. And he commented, he goes, it's really, really funny. We didn't make this for the critics. We didn't make this story to win Academy Awards. We made this story for operators, for Americans. And at the end of the day, while the critics were slamming it, it was getting 97, 98% on Amazon, Rotten Tomatoes, whatever. Sheridan talked about the same thing on Brother Joe's show just the other day. He goes, oh yeah, man, I get so much hate. I got a 30% or less rating and how toxic these shows are and how embellished, and yet they're 98% loved by the public. He goes, so I'm just going to keep it honest. I'm not going to deal with the haters. And that's the only way this story will get made. This story has to get made pure for the sake of my partners, my brothers that are out there risking their lives today.
The other people in the story.
The other people in the story, the integrity of the agency, the integrity to legitimate growers, not watering down this cartel threat, being honest on every level, both sides of the fence. And it takes a long time to find that crew and get lucky enough not to have some, liquid Velveeta cheesy version of this story that would just break my heart. So
you get it. And I have to say, because I talk to a lot of people that come from the military side of this, that have been in units, that have been with guys that have written books, done movies, been part of things. And there's a big divide in those communities about what's okay and what isn't, or, coming on podcasts and telling their own story, but also telling stories within their story, which involved other people.
Right.
And there is when I say their divide, it's a harsh divide about how those community members feel about one another. I can't totally relate to it because I didn't come from that. But my perspective on it is I get it. And the people that get pissed off about stuff, maybe other people writing a particular emblem, a particular color beret, a particular patch, whatever it happens to be, is that it's okay for you to do that as long as you give credit to the other people that were part of that story, and that the people telling that story respect that. And when part of telling the story, that be a producer, that be a filmmaker, whatever else, they can be part of that to do the best job they can given their limitations and restrictions that exist in making film and putting it out there and whatever else, to tell the story the right way. That is why when when it comes out, it's going to kill it, because those people from that community are going to recognize that, and they're going to talk about it, and they're going to put it out there, despite any other people that might be naysaying it. I'm confident it's gonna kill it, man.
Yeah, God. Well, I mean, I think we're going to be okay. I mean, because at the end of the day, the book's really clear, and that's why guys are codenamed of how it went down. And not all of this is going to make it in, and there's going to be things that aren't in the book that are going to come in on the personal backstory.
They can read the book,
and they can read the book.
Right.
But that's exactly it. We try to stay to it, and we do have that division. I've seen it with special operations friends, and I know with my SEAL team buddies, knowing that, you know, even Marcus Luttrell with Lone Survivor, it was like a split. Like, why did you go public?
Yep.
And the other guy's like,
it's a really good example.
Like, guys, honor those men.
Mm-hmm.
And if nothing else, for Axe and Danny and Murph and all those guys that lost in that crazy mission in Afghanistan, think of the sacrifices they made for the freedoms we have now that we've seen escalate as worse threats to the U.S. And I think that's why when it's done right, I believe those stories should be told. I think they inspire, and I think they educate. Because if someone isn't going to dive into a history book, and especially on the Hidden War issue is so damn hidden, obviously we're not going to get a bigger reach than edutainment, than a feature film.
The podcast.
Provided everything goes good. You know, it just helps. And more people relate, kids will relate, they'll see it. If they like the movie, obviously they're going to go, hey, I got to be careful of this. A fentanyl threat, a trafficking threat, cannabis when I experiment, whenever I start to use cannabis, if I do or not do. It's got that element to it. So I'm excited about the prospects, but a little apprehensive always on.
You have to be.
Don't jack this story up for the sake of my brothers.
I get it.
Yeah, but I think you're right. I think we have a good team, and I'll have more on that soon. But
that's all you can do. You know, all you can do is just try and do your best with it.
For
but
sure.
I think you've already mentioned some names. Like I read the Carr books. Like I understand, and I saw the film, and you recognize like it's close, but it's not the same as reading the book. It never will be. Right? No, it never is. But to your point about people seeing it and putting it out there and call it edutainment, if however you want to put it, infotainment, is just putting it in somebody's head.
Yeah,
because it wouldn't have got there any other way. And what they do with that is up to them. You can't control that.
Yeah.
But if you can do it in a way where it puts it in their head in a way where they think about it, they even just think about it, number one, or think about it maybe a little bit differently, then I think that's a win.
I think you're right. Versus, that issue's at least out there.
Exactly.
You know, someone, I want to watch a little more.
Right.
Maybe I'll learn a little more and not be freaked out.
Well, I'm excited about the prospect of that. Let's let's talk about the knives. I mean, I've been having to stare at these things. The last time you came in, you had the folders.
Right.
And obviously there's some fixed blades here now. I want to know about these. Like I purchased 2 of those.
You did. You got some thin green line folders. Thank you for that.
And I gifted one to actually our buddy Pranay, the Smokey Situation on Instagram. For those people.
Situation.
He's been on on the show a couple of times as a thank you for putting us together.
Yeah.
So I'm very familiar with these. I carry one regularly. So, but you got a lot of stuff going on here. It must be going well.
It's going great, man. I got to give a big shout out to Mike Bellicamp, my brother in arms here. He's the CEO and founder of VNIVES. He's a heck of a patriot, a musician. He's actually got a metal band that he just is recording an album on. I got to mention this from the music standpoint. They're called Medicine, but it's spelt Metassin. Evolution's the first album, and the lead song we co-wrote is called Hidden War.
Oh, nice. I'll have to get on top of this.
Yeah. It hasn't been dropped yet.
Okay.
But the reason I got to tell you about this, it's metal. It's brilliantly composed. We co-wrote the lyrics. I got to sing harmonies on it in the studio about a month ago up in Washington. The rest of the album is amazingly patriotic and cool, but stay tuned for that. The album's called Evolution, and he'll get to know you down the road on that. I think you'll dig it. But through COVID, after the folders, we went ahead and did a fixed line. Of fixed blades, thin green line Trailblazer series. And I brought a couple for some gifts.
Oh, nice.
So you're going to get to pick your fixed blade today.
Nice.
And Eli, our incredible friend and producer back over here, is going to get to pick his folder because I don't believe he even has a folder yet.
I don't think you got one.
So what we got, Scott, is we have this is a full-side fixed blade, the Trailblazer Survival. Just a bigger D2 steel version blade of mine. The folder, as you know. That's a 1/4-inch nut driver on the back end with tools available.
Oh, cool.
Very brutal. Molly capable injection molded sheath. And then, of course, we have the black handle with the thin green line color runners to mimic the thin green line. But we've got both styles.
Is the grip polymer or is it metal?
It's the G10.
Gotcha.
G10 polymer, so it's not going to rust. It's not going to be too hard on the body, or, on the hand when handling it. You get all the tools with it in the injection molded blocks. It's just much bigger.
I know the all black looks bigger than the green for whatever reason.
It does.
So
It has that.
I like it, but I also like the green and the thin green line on in the handle there. That's neat. It looks a little different than.
Yeah, kind of pretty.
It is. It's really nice.
But Mike and I designed those together, and man, he is a whiz at a sketch, and we wanted to, incorporate certain features that the folder had, and I didn't want it to be too big and too giant and cumbersome for a full-size survival blade.
Totally get it.
Yeah, so you get a 5-inch blade. It's good for, special ops guys, law enforcement. It's still a skin or a gutter. It's just a good survival knife for civilians or preparedness guys, and it's gone really well. And then this was not in the plan, but we got requests from military and law enforcement to have a small fixed blade that they could, have in a ballistic vest, have down on an ankle, kind of an oh shit possible.
Like a secondary. Yep.
So we named it after my sniper team, the Delta team. And you'll see the Delta triangle right there that was the symbol for our sniper team. And is my brand here is the Trailblazer Delta. These thin green line scale covers for the handle pop off with the provided tool.
Okay.
And then you have a skeletonized back here to wrap 550 cord, make
if you
it thin if you want. Exactly.
Oh, that's smart.
And then you have, this is actually vacuum-induced Kydex, our first time using Kydex, not injection molding, to keep it lighter and smaller. And
oh, wow. That is much
yeah,
lighter.
and those, we only did 1,000 of those in the first run, and I have like 3 left.
I love these.
And our distributors took the rest of them. Yeah, and they're at a ridiculous.
These are neat. Yeah, these are
cool.
Yeah, this is a great it could be your primary, but it could also, it's a very cool secondary blade.
Yeah, and as you can see, the drop point mimics, just like the full-size survival fixed, mimics my folder, so you can skin and gut. There's not a tonneau point on it, because if you're ever going to harvest animals or game, you want to run a drop point.
Right.
So, yeah. And then finally...
Stay true to the roots,
Stay true to the roots, baby. You got it, brother. And then, of course, the folder that started it all, the thin green line Trailblazer folder with the glass breaker and the seatbelt or harness cutter. We got firefighters and thin blue line police officers saying, what about us? So Mike and I said, absolutely.
Makes sense, man.
And
Give the people what they want, John.
And in honor of Prene, our firefighter buddy, and my sister, who's a San Jose fire captain retired.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Laura's 20 years here,
That's cool trivia. I had no
San
idea.
Jose. So we have the thin red line, right? And this is for folks like Prene, my sister, everybody, search and rescue. And then we got the thin blue line for our PD, our sheriffs, and all of them. So Eli gets to pick what folder he wants, because we got a little rainbow combination here. And Eli also have OD green handled on this too. So there it is, brother.
Yeah, they're gorgeous knives. I carry and use my folder regularly.
I am honored.
Yeah, it's a great knife. I mean, anybody around, all of my friends carry knives, right?
Yeah.
And
we all have several.
And we all have several. So like knives are like tattoos. If you start to get into the tattoo game, you have a ton of them. And they all, the best part about it is the stories.
Yeah.
And I think people like knives and guns and the thing, they think it's a little bit weird, but every knife I have has a story and a relationship attached to it in some way. And that's the cool part about these things that I don't think people understand. You were talking about the shooting and the relationships that get built. You were asking about the distance shooting.
Yeah.
And so anytime, like when I go to my box, that I have of my knives and I pick it up, you can't put that in your pocket or take it out of your pocket or use it without being reminded of where it came from, who's associated with it. I mean, I have, like the ones I got from you, but also people that I've crossed paths with. It's sort of like the challenge coin type thing.
Yeah, you start comparing notes.
And you can talk to people about it. It's great. But the better part about the knives, as opposed to the challenge coins, which I love, and I have several, and I have to get a display. I have enough of them now where I was saying I've got to get a display up in here to put them up.
Yeah,
is the utility in the knife. So you
need a knife.
You got some, and I use my knives every single day, whether it's opening an Amazon box or whatever I might be using it for. But they're good looking knives, and I think everybody's looking for it's got to look good. But the functionality here and just the quality is awesome.
One other thing I forgot to mention are built-ins.
Yeah, I just was going to say that. Yeah, the sharpeners on the.
You can sharpen any blade.
Yeah, for those for those people that are listening and not watching, there's a sharpener built into the fixed blade sheath, they're super they're awesome. I mean, if you like blades, if you're into quality craftsmanship, these VNIVES are awesome. I don't even think I've had to sharpen mine. You know, the one, and you have, I don't know if you mentioned this already, you have a serrated version of the folder as well.
We have a partially serrated, and then we have just a straight non-serrated, especially if you're doing nothing but field game dressing and stuff. I run a non-serrated, but the partially serrated, you have the front drop point that'll still do the job. So they go both ways, but you guys get to choose your blade of choice. You get to choose a fixed blade, and Eli gets to choose a folder.
All right, well, I'll give Eli the honors of going after when we're done here of going first. Listen, John, I was super excited to meet with you again for all the reasons I said at the beginning, but I'm going to walk away from this conversation feeling much like I felt, or like I described feeling walking away from some of these shoots I do with some of the guys.
Yeah.
And just sort of being refreshed. You've provided insight. There's been some education here. I'm excited. I'm always excited to hear what my friends are doing and how they're thriving and what their projects they're working on. I mean, is there anything you don't do, man? I mean, you're out there spreading the message. You're taking care of your family. You're playing music with your buddies. You're making knives. You're hunting. You're doing documentaries, films, writing books. And I think at the end of the day, it's what you're providing to the community that gets me so fired up about being able to tell people, John Norris is coming into the studio, aside from just the relationship we've been able to build. So, man, at risk of overdoing it, and I often find myself doing this too much, is just thanking you. But it's been an honor having you back down here, man.
Oh man, it's been great being here, Scott, and talking to you again. And congrats on everything you're doing. Seeing the podcast blow up as it should, the insight you're bringing. It's just good to see what's happened in the last year for you as well. And I'm honored to be here. And it's rejuvenating to share these conversations with you as a supporter, as a true friend, as somebody that is an advocate and a warrior on our thin green line in everything you're doing, because the pen is mightier than the sword, but you're definitely preparing with your sword as needed, which is great. So thank you for having me on, man. And we have a lot more updates to share and some things in the field, and we're just getting started.
Well, you'll always have a seat at this table.
Thank you.
For all the things that are coming down the pipe. And, as usual, and I've said this before, if there's anything that I can do to continue to spread the word, to get the information out there, to make the connections with the right people, all you got to do is say the word, man. And that said, I know that we'll probably, SHOT Show's a big place. There's a lot going on.
I'm looking for you.
Yeah, maybe. if
we can make it work.
If I see you, we'll do the chest bump and the hug there.
Yeah.
And again, travel safe and best of luck out there too, man.
Yeah, one thing on SHOT Show real quick before saying goodbye. On whatever Thursday that day is of SHOT, on Thursday at 2 p.m. at the VNIVES booth. We're going to have our first booth at SHOT Show.
Okay.
I'm going to be doing a book giveaway for 28 copies. First 28 people show up, get a free giveaway. They're going to get to meet Mike, look at our blades. So if you or any of your buddies in the shooting world want to come on over, you happen to be there, a lot of people to talk to. They'd love to see you, but we'll see how it goes. But I'll be there then for sure.
Well, I will definitely try to make it down there on that day. And this is actually very good timing, because for everybody that's listening to this podcast right now, in the car, in the plane, on their way to SHOT Show, because this will drop the Friday before SHOT Show.
Convenient timing.
Like you just heard it. Thursday, which is only a few days from when you're probably hearing this, show up to the VNIVES booth and get a copy of the book, and just support John and the things that he's doing for all the reasons he's doing them. So
yeah,
thanks, man.
Thanks, brother.